Chapter 217, Clash of Phenomenons. Chapter 217, Clash of Phenomenons. How you? I haven't treated you badly and our sect hasn't let you down either. Why? Give me a reason as to why you betrayed the sect. Wen Xian turned around, quivering as his gaze flashed with rage, shock, confusion, and deep disappointment. Elder Chen's betrayal did not crush Wen Xian. However, Feng Haoyu's betrayal was an immense blow to Wen Xian mentally. Back when Feng Haoyu was only at Qi Condensation Realm, Wen Xian requested for the sect master to impart Ethereal Sword to Feng Haoyu in advance. Within the inner sect, other than the three great legacy disciples, Feng Haoyu was the only Foundation Establishment cultivator who had learned all three major secret skills. Betray. Feng Haoyu scoffed coldly. I'm not from Ethereal Peak to begin with. The reason why I joined Ethereal Peak was just to learn the three major secret skills. In other words, I've never ever thought of you as my master. Sinful disciple. Wen Xian hollered coldly, I'll kill you today. We'll talk about that if you can survive today, old dog, Feng Haoyu sneered. All of a sudden, the two elders beside Wen Xian exclaimed, Watch out! Elder Yu and the other sect elder attacked simultaneously to intercept two incoming flying swords. Swoosh! Swoosh! Right then, Pang Fei, the golden core beside the blood-robed cultivator, suddenly strode forth. His expression was ice-cold and the spirit energy around him started to surge. A sinister black gust of wild wind appeared around Pang Fei, howling by as sand covered the skies. When he saw that, Elder Yu's expression changed starkly. The other sect elder's pupils constricted violently and his movements slowed down. His flying sword was swept into the black wind and the sound of countless fine sands striking the sword could be heard. Cling! Clang! Crack! In almost the blink of an eye, the flying sword shattered and its spirit light dimmed, plummeting from the skies. That superior-grade flying sword could not last more than a breath within that black wind. When he saw that, Su Zimo was shocked. Elder Yu's expression turned terrible as he said slowly, Golden Core Phenomenon. Bone-corroding black wind. So, that's a Golden Core Phenomenon. Su Zimo was secretly speechless. Even though he had heard about how terrifying Golden Core Phenomenons were, this was the first time he had seen one. Of Golden Cores, only very few could cultivate a Golden Core Phenomenon. Those that possessed the Golden Core Phenomenons could crush any Golden Cores with no Phenomenons. Be it at the Qi Condensation Foundation Establishment or Golden Core Realms, the energy source was spirit Qi and energy. The methods they used for cultivation and killing were all spirit arts. A Golden Core Phenomenon was the epitome of all spirit arts. It reigned supreme across all spirit arts. Therefore, those who had the Golden Core Phenomenons beneath Nascent Soul Realm were all the strongest Golden Core perfected beings. Go to hell! Pang Fei's voice was ice-cold as he waved his sleeves, causing a huge vortex to form within the black wind. It was like an ancient beast opening its mouth, threatening to devour the Ethereal Peak sect elder within. Wen Xian wanted to save him, but it was too late. Snap! The protection talisman on the sect elder shattered instantaneously. Ah! A blood-curdling scream could be heard. Against the black wind, the sect elder's body began to dissipate. Within a few seconds, there was only a pitch-black skeleton with no signs of life left. Ah! It was yet another shriek. A golden core of Blood Crow Palace was suddenly struck by a shower of rain, causing countless bloodied holes to appear all over his body. Riddled with holes, that person's gaze was dim as he fell from the skies. It was clear he wouldn't be able to survive. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. It was only then that everyone heard the sound of rain falling. It got heavier, clearer and evidently more hurried. Where did the rain come from? Everyone turned towards the sound. Around Wen Xian, it was suddenly raining cats and dogs with a heavy downpour. The raindrops were as long as swords, exuding an extremely intense sharpness. Golden Core Phenomenon, Ethereal Sword Rain. Against Wen Xian's Golden Core Phenomenon, the Golden Cores of Blood Crow Palace were defenseless and perished on the spot as well. The reason why Wen Xian could maintain his cool despite 10 golden cores on the other end alongside Elder Chen's betrayal was because he was at perfected golden core and had even cultivated a golden core phenomenon. Even if there were 10 golden cores on the other end, Wen Xian was confident that he could kill all of them later on. That was the power of a golden core phenomenon. The moment Peng Fei displayed his golden core phenomenon, Wen Xian realized that the situation wasn't right. To be precise, it was extremely serious and was a matter of life and death. The golden core spirit demon, Yu Fei, was calm and cold as he protected the blood-robed youth to descend to the ground. Scoffing coldly, the blood-robed youth waved his hand. Split up the battlefield, Peng Fei. Kill the 2 remaining golden cores in the air as soon as possible and leave the rest of the Foundation establishment cultivators to us. Understood. Peng Fei, who was in midair, nodded. On the ground, hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace wrapped around Yu Fei and the blood-robed youth, charging towards the many ethereal peak disciples. Do not fight. Quickly break out of the encirclement and inform the sect. When he saw that, Wen Xian bellowed and gave the order decisively. Right now, he and Elder Yu were barely able to fend for themselves. They could not get out and provide support. What the blood-robed youth meant by splitting up the battlefield was for Peng Fei and the other golden cores to hold and kill Wen Xian and Elder Yu in midair. The other Foundation establishment cultivators would then massacre everyone else on the ground. That way, be it in terms of the fight between the golden cores or Foundation establishment cultivators, Blood Crow Palace would have complete advantage over the situations. Break out of the encirclement. The blood-robed youth reared his head and roared into laughter. Stop dreaming. I had no intention of letting you guys leave this place alive today. None of you shall escape. Bang, bang, bang. At that moment, Peng Fei's bone-corroding black wind collided against Wen Xian's ethereal sword rain and created a deafening bang. The 2 completely different phenomena powers clashed in midair, causing a terrifying sight. Both their golden core phenomenons were similar in strength, and it was difficult to tell who would take the immediate lead. Apart from Peng Fei, Blood Crow Palace had 9 other golden cores. However, there was only Elder Yu beside Wen Xian. Kill! Elder Chen hollered and took the initiative, attacking without mercy. Gritting his teeth, Elder Yu defended with all his might. However, he fell into a disadvantage almost immediately and was in a dire situation. Bombarded by dangers, Elder Yu could die at any moment. When he saw that, Wen Xian let out a long roar and frantically channeled his golden core, sending spirit energy endlessly into his phenomenon recklessly. Splash! Waving his sleeves, Wen Xian's endless sword rain enveloped Elder Chen as well. You must be courting death. Peng Fei harumphed coldly and the black wind gusted, almost forming a hurricane that connected to the heavens as it sucked in the falling sword rain. Poof, poof, poof. The 2 different phenomena powers clashed once more, interlacing with one another and becoming more intense. Wen Xian's face was pale and his body swayed. At that moment, it was akin to him facing off against 10 golden cores alone. Moreover, one of those golden cores had a golden core phenomenon. He could not hold on for long. Chapter 218, Escape. Chapter 218, Escape. On the ground, countless Foundation establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace swarmed over. Wen Xian and Elder Yu were occupied in the air and could not extricate themselves. Given the situation, there was only a clear option for the ethereal peak disciples: escape. Furthermore, they did not have much time left. Once Wen Xian and Elder Yu could not hold on any longer, their opponents would no longer be just the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators on the ground. The golden cores would come after them as well. Hurry, let's go! The leader of the legacy disciples, Qin Yu, roared and turned to escape, not daring to linger. The other legacy disciple, Ji Chengtian, followed closely behind. Many ethereal sword disciples flew on their swords as they scattered and fled towards the outsides of Dongling Valley. Bro, Senior Sister Lung, let's flee! Little Fatty shouted, nervous and sweating profusely. Lung Ro nodded. Both of them looked towards Su Zimo instinctively. Right then, Su Zimo's gaze was narrowed as he let out a chilling killing intent. Wielding the supreme-grade flying sword in his palm, it trembled continuously. Naturally, Su Zimo knew that the smartest thing to do right now was to escape from this place. However, he was indignant. You guys go ahead first. I'm going to kill him. Su Zimo waved his sleeves and the supreme-grade flying sword in his palm shone with 4 dazzling beams of light. With a swoosh, it tore through the air and pierced towards Feng Haoyu. Bang! At the same time, Su Zimo took a step forward with his left foot and landed heavily on the ground. Exerting strength in both legs, he was like a divine steed, dashing madly, leaving a series of afterimages in his wake. Oh! Feng Haoyu sensed an extremely sharp aura akin to a beam stabbing on his back. The air was ripped apart, letting out strange, hissing noises. Furrowing his brows, Feng Haoyu turned his flying sword and channeled ethereal sword without thinking twice. Swoosh! His sword quivered and entered the voids. Because it was so fast, the superior-grade flying sword was almost melded into the void and became translucent, almost impossible to detect. In terms of sword-wielding technique, Feng Haoyu was indeed far superior compared to Su Zimo. Clang! Feng Haoyu's flying sword arrived first and managed to block Su Zimo's sword, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Supreme-grade flying sword. Noticing the 4 spirit patterns on Su Zimo's flying sword, Feng Haoyu's gaze turned fervent with a trace of greed. Feng Haoyu, hand your life over. Su Zimo's voice boomed out like thunder and his aura was torrential. Bearing a deadly killing intent, he possessed an indomitable force that came crashing down. Feng Haoyu's expression changed starkly. Su Zimo, how dare you! Feng Haoyu had not expected that instead of escaping, Su Zimo would choose to charge at the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators. Naturally, Su Zimo knew that he was no match for Feng Haoyu when it came to sword-wielding technique. Even with the supreme-grade flying sword, he would only be able to tie with Feng Haoyu at most if they were to have a sword fight. Hence, the reason why Su Zimo summoned his flying sword was merely to serve as a distraction for Feng Haoyu. His true killing move was still behind. Right now, Su Zimo was less than 5 steps away from Feng Haoyu. Given this distance, even if Feng Haoyu was at perfected Foundation establishment, he would have to die of regret. Boom! With a backhand punch, Su Zimo's right arm drew a gigantic arc in the air as he punched his fist like a seal, compressing the air and erupting into a deafening bang. Feng Haoyu did not have time to dodge and crushed a protection talisman in his hand instantly. A barrier of light rose up. Bang! The seal slammed heavily against the barrier with a supreme might. Snap! A Grade 2 protection talisman was destroyed by Su Zimo with a single punch. Pest! Gasping, Feng Haoyu's pupils constricted furiously. Su Zimo's gaze was ice-cold, his eyes laden with killing intent. Taking a step forth, he threw another punch. That single punch sealed all of Feng Haoyu's escape paths. Whoosh! Feng Haoyu spun around furiously and a pair of huge wings extended strangely from his back. Unlike real wings, his wings were formed by a secret skill to condense spirit energy. That secret skill was none other than one of Ethereal Peak's 3 major ones, ethereal wings. Ethereal wings was considered as a support technique. With that, Foundation establishment cultivators could soar through the air without the help of any external objects, just like golden cores. Compared to sword kinesis flight, ethereal wings made one even more agile. Used appropriately, the increase to a cultivator's strength would be extremely obvious. Given the situation, Feng Haoyu turned and fled. If he were to run on the ground, he would not be able to escape Su Zimo's pursuit. If he were to use sword kinesis flight, he had to summon his flying sword and there would be a delay in that. The only way he could escape alive was by making use of ethereal wings. Swish! The wings flapped as Feng Haoyu soared into the skies and sped through the air. That change had completely exceeded Su Zimo's expectations. Seeing that he was about to punch into air, Su Zimo stomped on the ground and leaped into the skies by making use of the rebound force. Crackle! At the same time, his tendons and bones resonated at the same time and his right arm suddenly expanded by an entire foot. Using his fist like a palm, he grabbed at Feng Haoyu's back. Shing! Blood filled the air. Ah! A tragic cry was heard in midair. A large piece of flesh was ripped off from Feng Haoyu's left leg, revealing his bones and tendons in a shocking manner. If Feng Haoyu had been any slower, his entire heart would have been ripped out. Su Zimo landed on the ground. Flapping his ethereal wings, Feng Haoyu's face was pale and cold sweat trickled down his face. He escaped to the side of the blood-robed youth, panting heavily as he looked back with lingering fear. At that moment, hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace had already rushed up, causing flying swords and spirit arts to rain down. The blood-robed youth was not the only one beside Feng Haoyu. There was the Golden Core Spirit Demon as well. It was no longer practical for Su Zimo to rush up and slay Feng Haoyu. Gritting his teeth, he retreated. Swoosh! The supreme-grade flying sword tore through the voids and returned to Su Zimo's side while slaying a Foundation establishment cultivator at the same time. Bang! Another Foundation establishment cultivator rushed over and was met with a casual punch by Su Zimo that caused his entire body to explode as he died on the spot. Splash! Churning his bloodline, a terrifying tsunami sound came from within Su Zimo's body, gushing rapidly in a frightening manner. In the vast crowd, Su Zimo was like an ancient demon with an overwhelming aura. Poof, poof, poof. He strode forth with the plow heaven's stride. Instantly, the many cultivators in front of him exploded on the spot as their flesh splattered, leaving nothing but corpses and a river of blood on the ground. Stepping on the corpses and river of blood, Su Zimo was like a god of death, charging towards the outside of Dongling Valley. Oh! Not far away, the blood-robed youth's gaze landed on Su Zimo. He exclaimed softly as he looked on with curiosity. What a powerful bloodline. Interesting. Who is that? The blood-robed youth asked. Gulping, Feng Haoyu replied with a deep voice. That is Su Zimo. He's the one that killed your blood slave outside of Linfeng City. I've finally found him. The blood-robed youth smirked in a lazy manner. It would be a pity if I killed someone with that bloodline just like that. I want to turn him into my blood slave. He shall bow to me as his master and be used by me for the rest of his life. Chapter 219. Slaying Meridian Foundation Establishment Cultivators. Chapter 219. Slaying Meridian Foundation Establishment Cultivators. Oh. Not far away, screams could be heard. The blood-eyed crows that were initially hovering in the skies flapped their wings as demonic chi swirled around them. Rushing down, they circled the disciples of Ethereal Peak and bit them continuously. Every single blood-eyed crow had the strength of a Foundation establishment spirit demon. They possessed terrifying strength that could not be ignored. Any Ethereal Peak disciples that fell behind would be devoured cleanly by the blood-eyed crows in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing but white bones. Before long, there were only a few dozen Ethereal Peak disciples left. Other than Su Zimo, all the other disciples that fell behind had all died. Qin Yu and Ji Chengtian, the two legacy disciples, were in a sorry state as they shouted with all their might to command the situation. With their efforts, they gathered the remaining dozens of disciples together and deployed their flying swords, spirit arts and talismans to weave out a defensive barrier, temporarily blocking the blood-eyed crows. However, the difference in strength between both sides was too great. The blood-eyed crows were endless, blotting out the skies and attacking the defensive barrier set by the Ethereal Peak disciples relentlessly. It was as if Qin Yu and the rest were walking through a swamp at an extremely slow speed as they sank deeper and deeper. It wouldn't last long. The moment Qin Yu and the others did not have enough spirit chi to continue or exposed any flaws, the entire defensive barrier would collapse. By then, the remaining dozens of people would turn into food for the blood-eyed crows. This was a complete massacre. With Elder Chen and Feng Haoyu as the spies, Blood Crow Palace had a complete grasp of Ethereal Peak's strength for this trap and planned this trap meticulously. Blood Crow Palace did not give Ethereal Peak any chance at all. After all, the blood-robed youth and the Golden Core Spirit Demon were still watching idly by the sidelines and had yet to take any action. Once the two of them attacked, the last hope of everyone from Ethereal Peak would be extinguished as well. The only choice left for the cultivators of Ethereal Peak today was to turn into blood slaves for the blood-robed cultivator. No one would be able to leave this place alive. At that moment, the blood-robed youth gazed at Su Zimo, who was battling in the crowd, and nodded repeatedly, feeling increasingly satisfied. Not bad, not bad, he said with a smile. Only a cultivator as such is worthy to be my blood slave. He can follow me and conquer the ancient battlefield. Young master, do you want me to capture that lad? Yu Fei, the golden core spirit demon behind the blood-robed youth, leaned in and asked with a cold expression. The blood-robed youth chuckled and waved it off. There's no need to hurry. Let's wait and see. I'm curious about this Su Zimo's limits and how long he can last. On the battlefield, 4 Foundation establishment cultivators stood side by side, blocking Su Zimo's path forward. Bang, bang, bang. There were sounds coming from the 4 of their bodies as spirit meridians surfaced on their bodies, illuminating through their robes. There were 2 1 Meridian, 1 2 Meridian and 1 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. To begin with, it was already ridiculous to have a cultivator with unlocked meridians fight a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Now, there were 4 cultivators with unlocked meridians and one of them was even at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment. The spirit energy of a 1 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was already superior to Su Zimo, let alone a 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Su Zimo was definitely not a match for them in terms of brute strength. Furthermore, the 4 Meridian cultivators worked together in sync, interweaving their spirit arts and flying sword together to form an impenetrable trap to block Su Zimo's escape path. There was no way Su Zimo could escape at all. Hiss, hiss, hiss. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his mouth wide and took a deep breath, causing a massive air current to surge down his throat with a faint pain. With a puffed-up chest, Su Zimo nearly took in all the surrounding air through a single breath. Anaconda Eclipse. At the same time, the thumb and middle of his left hand joined together to form a strange hand seal, causing spirit energy to circulate insanely within him. Even though the fiend suppression seal was extremely strong, it consumed too much spirit energy. Once he used that move, Su Zimo would be left with almost no spirit energy. That was also why he waited till now before releasing it. Fiend suppression seal. A gigantic golden palm descended from the skies. The patterns on the palm could be seen clearly as it emitted a golden glow and tore through the layers of fog, crushing the bodies of many blood-eyed crows that it passed. Oh! The 4 Meridian cultivators narrowed their gazes and instantly recognized how formidable that hand seal was. However, the 4 of them were composed. With their eyesight, they were able to deduce that even though the power of that hand seal was immense, the spirit energy in Su Zimo's body was too little. He was unable to unleash the full might of the fiend suppression seal. The combined strength of the 4 of them would be enough to destroy the fiend suppression seal. Flying Immortal Art. Sky Capital Fist. Silver Frost. Cloud-Tearing Finger. The 4 of them released their spirit arts at the same time, pointing it at the gigantic golden palm that was descending from the skies. Right then, Su Zimo opened his mouth and roared. Kill! His voice was like thunder, booming through the crowd. The other cultivators froze for a brief moment. The 4 Meridian cultivators in front of him trembled slightly and the spirit energy in their hands nearly dispersed. Naturally, the power of their spirit arts could not be used to their fullest extent. That was the thunderclap kill. That surprise attack through his voice was enough to confuse his opponents. In truth, Su Zimo was unable to unleash the true might of thunderclap kill at this moment due to restrictions of his physique. Bang! Boom! Boom! The gigantic golden palm crushed from the skies and clashed with the 4 spirit arts. A series of loud booms echoed out, but the palm was not destroyed right away. Swash! A strange sword beam appeared, slicing at the side of the 4 Meridian cultivators with a cold killing intent. 4 spirit patterns shone on the sword. It was Su Zimo's supreme grade flying sword. In fact, Su Zimo had already sent out his flying sword at the same time as when he released the Fiend Suppression Seal and Thunderclap Kill. The 2 moves earlier were all superficial trump cards. His true killing move was the flying sword at the back. Poof, poof, poof. 3 consecutive crisp sounds could be heard. The necks of 3 Meridian cultivators were pierced. Blood flashed. Looking terrified, all 3 of them clutched at their wounds furiously. However, blood continued to gush out in an unstoppable momentum. Their eyes dimmed as they sensed their lives draining away from their moment. That attack had not only pierced their throats. The sword chi emitted was so sharp that it even severed their large arteries. That was equivalent to chopping their heads off entirely. Thump! Falling to the ground one after another, all 3 pairs of eyes were widened as their bodies convulsed limply. Blood flowed from their bodies and stained the ground. Of the 4 people, only the 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator had managed to escape that tragedy. However, he was also scared out of his wits after that exchange of blows. Retreating to the side, he looked at Su Zimo fearfully. If he had not experienced it himself, this would have been truly unimaginable. To think that a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator would be able to slay Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators with the use of so many secret killing moves. If someone like that were to cultivate to the state of Meridian Foundation establishment, how frightening would his combat strength be? Chapter 220, Wrath of Thunder. Chapter 220, Wrath of Thunder. Although the clash between both parties seemed short, it was filled with spirit arts, a clash of secret skills and psychological warfare. Given another battlefield or environment, Su Zimo may not have been able to win. Furthermore, he was left with almost no spirit energy after releasing Fiend's suppression seal. Right then, Su Zimo's scalp tingled as he felt a sense of danger. He realized that he had been targeted. Furthermore, that person was extremely strong and wasn't someone he could resist. It was a Golden Core expert. It could be the Golden Core that was fighting when Xian and Elder Yu in midair, or the Spirit Demon Golden Core that was standing beside the blood-robed youth. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and tried hard to compose himself. Breaking through the encirclement, he sped until he was outside Qin Yu and the others. Caw caw. Many blood-eyed crows caught the scent of fresh blood and let out unpleasant cries as they swarmed toward Su Zimo in the hundreds. Those blood-eyed crows were all spirit demons with powerful bodies. They posed a huge threat for Qin Yu and the other Foundation establishment cultivators. Qin Yu and the others did not dare let the blood-eyed crows come close at all. However, Su Zimo's body was much stronger than those ordinary blood-eyed crows. Even if more blood-eyed crows were to surround him, they may not be able to injure him. It was no exaggeration to claim that although Su Zimo was human, even the physique of ancient remnant demon beasts may not be able to match his. Even against pure-blooded ferocious beasts, Su Zimo's body and bloodline were superior. Su Zimo's expression did not change when he saw the blood-eyed crows swarming towards him. A roaring sound of tigers and leopards alongside thunder rumbling echoed forth from his body. Splash! Bang! Boom! Boom! The blood-eyed crows were not only not scared of such a formidable bloodline, the sanguine light in their eyes grew even brighter as they turned more ferocious. They saw Su Zimo was nothing more than a delicious piece of tonic. After all, blood-eyed crows were only ordinary demon beasts. How could they have the chance to devour the flesh of an ancient remnant beast or pure-blooded ferocious beast on a day-to-day basis? Su Zimo, on the other hand, was a living, breathing, pure-blooded ferocious beast right in front of them. As long as they could eat a piece of Su Zimo's flesh and drink a mouthful of his blood, their strength would increase significantly. Bro! When he saw that, Little Fatty exclaimed. However, his voice was drowned by the cries of the endless blood-eyed crows and couldn't be heard. Lang Ro's heart skipped a beat and her gaze dimmed. They knew clearly well how terrifying the blood-eyed crows were. None of the cultivators that were left behind could escape from being devoured alive by those beasts. So what if Su Zimo was strong in melee combat? He was a human after all. How could he withstand so many blood-eyed crows? Little Fatty and Lang Ro could only watch on helplessly as the blood-eyed crows swarmed at Su Zimo, drowning him in their midst. Forget it. Lang Ro sighed inwardly and shook her head. They could not hold on much longer either. Their resistance was merely a momentary respite. Before long, they would end up in the same tragic state. Disheartened, Lang Ro switched her flying sword's direction and was prepared to commit suicide. She did not want to experience being torn apart by the blood-eyed crows till she was unrecognizable. Rather than that, she would rather do it herself. Right then, a strange sound burst forth from the blood-eyed crows that were surrounding Su Zimo. Crackle! Endless flashes of lightning burst forth from Su Zimo's body in a blinding manner. Snap! Thunder boomed. A thick thunderbolt shot down from the skies, connecting to Su Zimo's body without dissipating for a long time as though he was a link to the heavens. In the middle of everything, dazzling thunderbolts extended in all directions from Su Zimo like pythons. They surged wildly, as if forming an ocean of lightning with raging waves, enveloping the blood-eyed crows in its midst. The power of thunder was the most terrifying among all various powers. Furthermore, thunder was strong and masculine, purging evil with ease. It was the nemesis of something vile like these blood-eyed crows. Under the sweeping of the lightning ocean, the blood-eyed crows cried out tragically as they fell from the skies, covered in thick smoke. It was an extremely shocking sight. Be it the Blood Crow Palace cultivators or Ethereal Peak disciples, all of them watched on dumbfounded as disbelief filled their eyes. Through the depths of the firmaments, thunder descended onto Xueqi's body. Standing in the middle of the lightning ocean, he stood unmoved. He was like a god undergoing a catharsis of lightning, looking down at the vast sky and purging all evil in the world. This was the wrath of thunder. Well, well, well. The blood-robed youth was the first to react. His eyes lit up as he laughed instead of getting angry, nodding repeatedly without concealing the admiration in his eyes. As for Feng Haoyu, his eyes revealed a hint of fear and even envy. Even though he had learned the 3 major secret skills of the sect, he did not know of any thunder art as such. The golden core spirit demon, Yu Fei, had an indifferent expression as he looked on coldly. No matter what tricks Xueqi had up his sleeves, it did not affect the current situation at all. Golden cores and foundation establishment cultivators were a world of a difference that could not be closed. As long as he made a move, Xueqi would not be able to fight back. All right. A series of cheers broke out from the crowd of Ethereal Peak. After Xueqi's attack, the number of blood-eyed crows decreased rapidly and that eased the pressure on Qin Yu and the others significantly. Xueqi, I'll offer you a chance to live. Be my blood slave. Right then, the blood-robed youth walked towards Xueqi. His pace was unhurried and his tone was calm. However, it carried a hint of unquestionable power. Turning around, Xueqi's gaze lingered momentarily on the blood-robed youth. To the people of Ethereal Peak, the situation in front of them was a deadly trap. But right at that moment, Xueqi vaguely sensed that there was a sliver of life in this deadly trap. The blood-robed youth had an extremely high status and the golden core spirit demon did not leave his side at all, guarding like a shadow. If Xueqi could lure the blood-robed youth away, that golden core spirit demon would leave as well. That way, a massive threat would be removed for everyone of Ethereal Peak. Even though there were still quite a number of blood-eyed crows and foundation establishment cultivators left in the battlefield, the Ethereal Peak disciples might have a chance of escaping since they were all at foundation establishment realm. This was the only chance for everyone of Ethereal Peak. Even though it was a sliver of hope, it was worth a try. Someone like you. Xueqi scoffed coldly at the blood-robed youth before turning around suddenly, speeding towards the outside of Dongling Valley. The formidable bloodline aura emitted by Xueqi attracted a large number of blood-eyed crows to chase after him as well. He was extremely fast. Making use of divine steed fleeting, even perfected foundation establishment cultivators would not be able to match his full speed. Oh, you want to escape? The blood-robed youth focused his gaze and withdrew a white bone staff from his storage bag. With a single leap, he stood on it and sped forth, his body bursting with spirit energy. The light of spirit meridians flashed endlessly from the blood-robed youth's body. 1, 2, 3, 4 spirit meridians. The blood-robed youth was a 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. Chapter 221, Turning Tides. Chapter 221, Turning Tides. The speed of a 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator on his flying sword was astonishing once he released his spirit energy. The wind howled in his ears as the blood-robed youth rode his white bone staff, chasing after Xueqi who was running away in the distance. A few seconds later, the blood-robed youth realized to his shock that despite his terrifying speed, he could not catch up to Xueqi who was sprinting on the ground. Even if he used all his strength, it was useless. At most, he could only ensure that Xueqi could not shake him off. This guy's physique is actually so strong that he possesses such burst power. The blood-robed youth's evaluation of Xueqi was already very high. But now, he realized that he had still underestimated this person. Right then, Yu Fei's voice rang out. That lad's bloodline is extremely strong and he's already at the legendary tsunami blood state. His physique and bloodline is not weaker than ancient remnant beasts. In fact, it's even comparable to pure-blooded ferocious beasts. As a golden core spirit demon, Yu Fei's gaze was naturally brilliant. At that moment, he traveled through the skies with hands behind his back, following after the blood-robed youth with a relaxed expression. Yu Fei, take me along to chase after him. Seeing that he was unable to catch up to Su Zimo, the blood-robed youth was indignant as he said with a darkened expression and cold gaze. All right. Yu Fei agreed to it casually. In midair, Yu Fei's body changed constantly. It was contorting, shrinking in some places, twisted in others as his bones and tendons rang out with the sound of beans being fried. In the blink of an eye, Yu Fei had transformed into a gigantic blood-eyed crow. The blood-robed youth understood what it implied and with a single leap, hopped onto the blood crow that Yu Fei had transformed into. Although he was carrying someone, Yu Fei's speed increased rapidly and his body almost turned into a stream of light. So fast. Su Zimo turned back and was secretly alarmed. The speed of a golden core spirit demon was way faster than he was. Carrying the blood-robed youth, Yu Fei descended in front of Su Zimo before long, blocking his path forward. With a spin, Yu Fei returned to his human form and followed behind the blood-robed youth indifferently. Fufufu, you can't escape. Looking at Su Zimo, who was speeding over with no intention of slowing down, the blood-robed youth scoffed coldly. He waved the white bone staff in his left hand and muttered a mysterious incantation. After his incantation, 5 pitch-black skulls flew out from the white bone staff, splitting in 5 different directions before striking at Su Zimo. Ah! Ah! Before they arrived, the 5 skulls let out blood-red rays of light from their sockets while crying sinisterly. Oh! Upon seeing that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. That technique seemed to have exceeded the limits of spirit arts. Those 5 skulls were even emitting a terrifyingly baneful aura. How much blood and how many lives did it take for something so evil to be created? Su Zimo collected himself quickly, his gaze icy and his expression unchanged. The situation in front of him was clear. Even if he were to retreat, it would be difficult to escape death. If he chose to fight head-on, he might have a chance of dragging someone down with him. In the blink of an eye, the 5 skulls landed on Su Zimo's body, chomping down with wide-open mouths. Boom! With a loud bang, the sound of tsunami and thunder could be heard from Su Zimo's body. Blinding lightning shone from Su Zimo's body in a terrifying manner. The pitch-black skulls were merely slightly blocked by the lightning, lessening the evil aura that they emitted. Suddenly, they broke through the lightning barrier and bit Su Zimo's flesh. How strong was Su Zimo's body? With body petrification, even a middle-grade flying sword would not be able to hurt him. However, those 5 skulls managed to tear through Su Zimo's skin the moment they bit down. Sucking continuously, the skulls gulped down excitedly on Su Zimo's blood essence as the red glow in their eyes intensified. It was as though they were gaining a life of their own. If you want to eat, I'll let you have your fill. Right then, Su Zimo bellowed all of a sudden. No longer suppressing the demonic chi in his body, he released everything alongside his surging bloodline. That was the power of blood chi. It was even stronger than the power of blood alone. At that moment, demonic chi swirled around Su Zimo as his bloodline rumbled, causing his body to expand. His eyes revealed an endless chill in them, looking massive as if an ancient demon with a fervent killing intent had possessed him. Naturally, most cultivators could detect the appearance of demonic chi. However, Su Zimo was far away from the battlefield at the moment. He was almost at the boundaries of Dongling Valley. Given that distance, the cultivators that were stuck in the battlefield could not sense the demonic chi that was coming forth from Su Zimo. Furthermore, they didn't have the attention nor energy to do so. As for the blood-robed youth opposite Su Zimo, he was shocked as his expression changed. The difference between him and Su Zimo was too close. At that distance, Su Zimo was practically an invincible god. The skulls that were initially sucking Su Zimo's blood were suddenly repelled by a terrifying power of blood chi. The tides had turned entirely. Initially, Su Zimo was disadvantaged and could have been turned into a blood slave at any time. Now, they were in a completely different situation. The blood-robed youth's life was hanging on a thread. Boom! Su Zimo's gaze was sharp as a knife. With a roar, he strode forth, causing the ground to tremble violently. Hand your life over. Su Zimo stretched his arms, grabbing at the blood-robed youth whose face was pale and was retreating endlessly. Su Zimo was trying to use a killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Divine Steed Dismemberment. If he managed to grab the blood-robed youth, the latter would not be able to escape a fate of being torn apart. From Su Zimo's point of view, as long as he could drag this blood-robed youth down with him before he died, he would have made a killing. The blood-robed youth was close to being caught by Su Zimo when suddenly, a figure appeared behind him. Golden Core Spirit Demon, Yu Fei. He was equally surprised when he saw Su Zimo releasing demonic qi. However, his reaction was extremely fast. Before Su Zimo could do anything, Yu Fei blocked in front of the blood-robed youth and saved the latter from the gates of hell. Piak! Piak! Sneering coldly, a hint of mockery flashed in Yu Fei's eyes as he reached out and grabbed Su Zimo's wrist. At the same time, Yu Fei's chest faintly emitted an even stronger aura that managed to suppress Su Zimo's blood qi. Inner core. That was his inner core. With his wrists grabbed by Yu Fei, Su Zimo felt weak all over and his eyes dimmed. What a pity. He was so close. If he had a single second more, the blood-robed youth would have died for sure. Once Su Zimo released his power of blood qi, he was confident that he would be able to kill even a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Su Zimo, you're very strong indeed. Yu Fei said coldly, but with me here today, you won't be able to hurt young master at all. This time, Blood Crow Palace's lord had specially instructed Yu Fei and Peng Fei to protect the young master. If anything were to happen to him, the palace lord would kill the both of them for sure. Chapter 222. The Only Variables. Chapter 222. The Only Variable. Ah! Su Zimo howled at the skies with widened eyes. His black hair swayed without any wind as his blood qi burst forth. Bang! Boom! Boom! Su Zimo's bloodline rumbled, causing thunder to roar and demonic to swirl around him. As his large tendons and bones trembled, his strength had already reached its limit. Even so, Yu Fei, who was standing opposite Su Zimo, maintained his composure. He gripped Su Zimo's wrists tightly without budging a single inch at all. This was a complete suppression in terms of strength and cultivation realm. There was no technique to speak of. When the quality of a golden core was extremely high with pure spirit energy, it would be able to achieve a harmony with the heavens and earth, forming a phenomenon. That was how golden core phenomenons were born. Because demons did not possess spirit energy, there would naturally be no golden core phenomenons as well. However, the inner cores of demons were formed through the qi of the skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow and 5 organs. A combination of their entire body's essence, that was the source of their power. By condensing an inner core, the demon's skin, flesh, bloodline, bones, marrow and organs would completely transform, causing their strength to increase exponentially. That power was more than enough to completely crush any Foundation establishment spirit demons. Looking at Su Zimo who was struggling, Yu Fei raised his chin, as if he was looking at a lesser being, and curled his lips with a cold expression. Fu. The blood-robed youth walked over slowly. He sneered as a mocking look flashed in his eyes. To him, Su Zimo was like a rat that had fallen into the hands of a cat right now. No matter how he struggled, nothing would change. I told you, you won't be able to escape today. Coming before Su Zimo, the blood-robed youth said sternly as his eyes lit up, turn into my blood slave obediently. The blood-robed youth waved his white bone staff and recited an abstruse incantation. Within the voids, a strange power began to emanate. The eyes of the blood-robed youth glowed with a sinister shade of faint green. Su Zimo met with his gaze and instantly felt himself going dizzy. Not good. In that instant, Su Zimo lost his mind and felt as if he had fallen into an endless darkness. Sinking endlessly. He could not extricate himself. An extremely evil power began to invade Su Zimo's mind. Su Zimo's eyes faintly emitted a green glow. Ah! He roared continuously from the depths of his heart and shouted at the top of his lungs. However, he could not break free from that mental control. No one can control me. Lowering his head, Xueqi's body trembled violently and the veins on his neck were exposed. His face's blood vessels were visibly seen as he did not give up despite the enduring pain. The blood-robed youth's technique was an extremely powerful secret skill, blood slave art. Once a cultivator's mind was corroded by blood slave art, they could fall into a mental illusion which was extremely difficult to break out of through their own efforts. Therefore, blood slave art was something that must not be interrupted or disturbed by external forces while it was being executed. The blood-robed youth felt that this was an extremely appropriate situation for him to deploy blood slave art. Xueqi was restrained by Yu Fei and could not budge. The three of them were far away from the battlefield and no one could interrupt the execution process. The blood-robed youth could almost envision Xueqi kneeling before him with a reverent and pious expression as a blood slave. However, be it the blood-robed youth or Yu Fei, they forgot something. That was the only variable. That variable did not merely affect the fates of Xueqi, the blood-robed youth and Yu Fei. It affected the entire Battle of Dongling Valley as well. Perhaps, none of them would foresee that the effect of the variable would not merely end here. After today, that effect would continue and eventually affect the entire Tianhuang mainland, stirring huge waves within. At the boundaries of Dongling Valley, Xueqi extended his arms, rooted on the ground. He trembled endlessly with a pained expression. His arms were held down firmly by two large hands. Opposite him was the golden core spirit demon, Yu Fei. Beside Yu Fei stood the blood-robed youth. With his head lowered, Xueqi's black hair was let down. Right then, Xueqi felt a strange movement in his chest. In that slightly opened robe of his, a little beast hid inside. It looked at the miserable Xueqi and its round and pitch-black eyes sparkled as if it was a vast galaxy, deep and mysterious. Xueqi was originally trapped in that mental illusion, surrounded by complete darkness. All of a sudden, an external force barged in, paving a path through that darkness. The next moment, Xueqi caught sight of a little beast. It was like a little dog, looking at him with its head tilted as it blinked its pitch-black and sparkling eyes. Night Spirit, Xueqi muttered softly. When he met with little beast's gaze, Xueqi was shocked and suddenly broke free from the mental illusion. Night Spirit's gaze seemed to possess a mysterious power that could purge away the evil from Xueqi's body. Even though he managed to break out of the mental illusion, Xueqi was sweating profusely and almost out of strength. Hurry and escape. Xueqi's lips trembled as he said with a hoarse voice. Although Night Spirit had a mysterious background and managed to help him break free from the mental illusion, it was still too young. It had been less than a month since it was born. What could a month-old baby do? Notwithstanding a human baby, even a month-old pure-blooded ferocious beast would have delicate skin and tender bones, pitifully weak at best. Of course, even though Night Spirit was young, it was extremely intelligent and had already gained sentience. Xueqi knew that Night Spirit could understand his words and could read the situation as well. His fate was already decided. Now that he was in the hands of a golden core spirit demon, there was no way he could escape. However, it was different for Night Spirit. It looked like a weak puppy through and through. Be it the blood-robed youth or Yu Fei, none of them would bother about it, giving it a great chance to escape alive. Upon hearing Xueqi's words, Night Spirit's expression was calm and it did not move. It remained hidden in Xueqi's embrace without exposing itself, merely listening with its head tilted as though it was trying to pay attention to what was going on outside. Ugh! Almost at the same moment as when Xueqi broke out of the mental illusion, a muffled groan came from the other side. The blood-robed youth covered his head with both hands. He was in extreme pain as his deep green eyes were bloodshot while his facial features were contorted, looking extremely frightening. If blood slave art was interrupted by any normal external force, the impact on the caster wouldn't be that great. But this time, the blood-robed youth's blood slave art was reflected by a mysterious force. The failure of the technique along with the backlash from the force struck the blood-robed youth like a thunderbolt. His head felt like it was splitting as he nearly fainted. Oh! Yu Fei frowned. He was still gripping Su Zimo's arms tightly as he turned around to the blood-robed youth and asked in concern, "What's wrong, young master?" At that moment, Su Zimo's chest moved. A black shadow darted out, running on Su Zimo's arm onto Yu Fei's arm within a couple of steps. Like a ghost, the black shadow was extremely fast and appeared at Yu Fei's chest in the blink of an eye. Pausing for a brief moment, the black shadow suddenly raised its paw. 5 extremely sharp claws poked out, flashing with a cold glint, swiping at Yu Fei's throat with a bloodied smell of death. Chapter 223, 3 Rounds. Chapter 223, 3 Rounds. At the same time, the blood-robed youth endured the pain in his head and gritted his teeth. "Watch out, there's something else on Su Zimo's body." However, it was already too late when he said that. The moment Night Spirit struck, Yu Fei felt something and turned around instinctively. The next moment, his pupils constricted violently and his heart stopped beating. Poof! A flash of blood appeared as Yu Fei's Adam's apple was torn apart by Night Spirit alongside a huge chunk of flesh. Fresh blood splattered all over Su Zimo's body. Night Spirit's timing could be described as perfect. The entire process was smooth and fluid like water. In that brief moment, Night Spirit displayed a precise and keen sense of timing towards the situation. That was a capability that no one had imparted to him. It was completely through instinct. Killing instinct. When he saw that, Su Zimo was stunned. The blood-robed youth's mind went blank and he was stunned as well. That strike was way too ruthless. Even if Yu Fei was a golden core spirit demon, there was no way he could survive given that serious injury. Yu Fei's eyes were widened and a black glow suddenly burst forth from his chest. With a backhand punch, he struck towards Night Spirit's head. It was the final gamble of a golden core spirit demon at the brink of death. The entire process seemed very slow, but in fact, it occurred in the split of a moment. Yu Fei had already reacted extremely quickly. Right after his throat was ripped by Night Spirit's claws, he wanted to kill Night Spirit on the spot at the very first instant. Since his large arteries were severed and he had suffered immense loss of blood and qi, Yu Fei had already realized that he would definitely die. However, he wanted to kill Night Spirit right before he died. Against Yu Fei's incoming punch, Night Spirit leaped and turned its head, dodging to the side with all its might. Bang! Even so, Yu Fei's punch struck Night Spirit on the waist heavily. Hia! Night Spirit cried out in pain and there was a clear depression on its waist. Like a kite with a snapped string, Night Spirit was sent flying into Su Zimo's arms after that punch. With its eyes closed, Night Spirit coughed out blood repeatedly and was already unconscious. When he saw that, Su Zimo felt his heart ache. Compared to the true strength of a golden core spirit demon, Night Spirit who was only a month old was truly much weaker. This was akin to an infant that was a few years old wielding a dagger in his hand. Even though he had the power to kill an adult, he would never ever be a match for the adult. In reality, if not for the fact that Yu Fei had been severely injured with his strength decreased drastically after the massive loss of qi and blood, that punch would have very likely blown Night Spirit's body apart. That punch seemed to have drained Yu Fei of all his vitality. "Young master, hurry, escape." Yu Fei's face was pale and his throat was broken as he spat out words intermittently. Despite that, he was trying his best. After those 4 words, he fell to the ground with a thud. His eyes were lifeless and the ground was swiftly stained red by his blood. Placing Night Spirit back into his robes, Su Zimo looked at the blood-robed youth opposite him with a cold, murderous gaze. At that moment, Su Zimo was not in a good state. He had managed to break free from the mental illusion thanks to Night Spirit's help. However, he had taken a huge toll during this period of time and was both mentally and physically exhausted. It was akin to having gone through a battle with a top expert. The blood-robed youth was not in the best state either. The blood-robed youth was still suffering waves of pain from the disruption of blood slave art along with the power backlash. He was clearly somewhat dazed. Given their terrible conditions, if they were to truly fight, no one could tell who would be the eventual victor. However, when he saw how Yu Fei died and recalled Yu Fei's final words, the blood-robed youth already had the urge to retreat. Furthermore, who was he? As the young master of Blood Crow Palace, his status was immeasurably noble. Why did he have to engage in a life-and-death bout with this Foundation establishment cultivator before him? As long as he were to avoid this person for the time being, the latter would definitely die once the golden cores from the battlefield arrived. At that thought, the blood-robed youth was decided. Retreat! Right then, Su Zimo's gaze turned over, sharp as a knife as if wanting to tear him into pieces. That gaze was completely unlike a human's gaze. It was more like an ancient ferocious beast that was extremely hungry, violent, brutal and bloody. The blood-robed youth's heart skipped a beat and his guts shrank, taking a half-step back subconsciously. Bang! That single half-step caused Su Zimo's aura to increase massively. Using the momentum, Su Zimo deployed the plow heaven stride and charged forward. Churning his power of blood chi, he punched with his backhand like a massive seal that descended from the skies. Su Zimo's eyes were filled with endless coldness without the slightest hint of mercy. Just moments ago, he was nearly controlled and turned into a blood slave by this blood-robed youth. Night Spirit was severely injured and might even die. Most of the sharpest Foundation establishment disciples of Ethereal Peak had perished. 2 sect elders had perished as well. Those blood debts had to be repaid by this blood-robed youth's life. Save me! The blood-robed youth was appalled as he shrieked while pulling out a white bone shield from his storage bag. Injecting spirit energy to it, the white bone shield expanded massively and the blood-robed youth tossed it out hurriedly to block above his head. Having lost his courage, the blood-robed youth could no longer attack and could only defend. In his opinion, as long as he could last 10 rounds, there would definitely be Golden Core reinforcements from the Golden Core battlefield not far away. They would save him and kill Su Zimo at the same time. On the Golden Core battlefield, the 10 Golden Cores with Peng Fei leading them surrounded and attacked Wen Xian and Elder Yu, possessing complete control of the situation. If not for Wen Xian's Golden Core phenomenon, both of them would have died a long time ago. However, releasing a Golden Core phenomenon consumed a lot of spirit energy. Wen Xian could not hold on for much longer. When he heard the cry for help, Peng Fei's expression changed. Quickly, go and support the young master. Nothing must happen to him. Peng Fei pointed at 2 golden cores and shouted. The 2 of them extricated themselves hurriedly and flew through the air, speeding towards the direction of the blood-robed youth. Everything was happening just as the blood-robed youth expected. Indeed, he would receive golden core reinforcements after his cry for help. However, the blood-robed youth was wrong about one thing. Bang! Su Zimo's fist landed on the white bone shield and let out a deafening bang. Trembling violently, a series of cracks appeared on the bone shield as its light dimmed. The white bone shield was shattered by a single punch of Su Zimo's. Pest! Instantly, the blood-robed youth gasped and his expression changed. Right after, Su Zimo's figure flashed and he arrived in front of the blood-robed youth. A cold light burst forth from within Su Zimo's eyes as he reached out and grabbed the blood-robed youth's arms, forcefully tearing them apart. At the same time, he bent his knees and charged forth like a divine steed. Divine steed dismemberment. Shing! A mist of blood filled the air. Ah! In the midst of a shrill scream from the blood-robed youth, Su Zimo had forcefully ripped his arms off. Right after divine steed dismemberment was divine steed trampling. Su Zimo kneed against the blood-robed youth's chest, and with a leap, he used the momentum of the blow. Both legs were at the blood-robed youth's throat as Su Zimo trampled twice on his head. Without a single pause, Su Zimo's body had already passed the blood-robed youth. The 2 killing moves connected seamlessly and could only be described as perfect. The moment Su Zimo landed on the ground, the blood-robed youth fell face first as well. His chest was caved in and his throat was torn apart while his face was mangled beyond recognition. The blood-robed youth was thoroughly dead. The blood-robed youth was wrong about one thing. Su Zimo did not need 10 rounds to kill him. He merely needed 3 rounds. Chapter 224. A Sliver of Life. Chapter 224. A Sliver of Life. Right as the blood-robed youth died, Black Crow Mountain, which was thousands of kilometers away, suddenly burst forth with an extremely terrifying aura as though the apocalypse had arrived. Every living creature on Black Crow Mountain was scared out of their wits, sprawling on the ground motionlessly. Who? Who is it? How dare you kill my disciple? From the depths of Black Crow Mountain, a deep and sinister roar came from a huge palace that contained endless fury and killing intent. I'm going to tear you to pieces and turn your bones to ashes. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening bang, the entire palace shook violently. The blood mist around it grew thicker and was almost materialized. The entire palace seemed to be floating in a sea of blood, faintly discernible. A figure rushed out from the palace and suddenly opened his mouth, sucking hard. Splash! The sea of blood surged, forming a huge vortex that gushed into the figure's open mouth relentlessly. In the blink of an eye, the sea of blood disappeared. A middle-aged man stood in the air with his black hair draped over his shoulders. His face was thin and he wore a dark red robe while a sinister gaze shone from his faint green eyes. Caw caw! Suddenly, an ear-piercing screech could be heard from Black Crow Mountain. Initially, that sound was far away. However, it came close in the blink of an eye. A gigantic crow with bloodshot eyes was flapping its wings, streaking across the skies of Black Crow Mountain and approaching. That was the king among the many blood-eyed crows of Black Crow Mountain. The Blood Crow King. When the Blood Crow Palace's lord first arrived at Black Crow Mountain, this crow was the first creature he subdued. It had gained quite a bit of benefits by following Blood Crow Palace's lord. By now, its cultivation was already equivalent to the peak of a nascent soul. Master! The Blood Crow King arrived at the skies above the palace and suddenly descended. When it landed on the ground, it transformed into a black-robed cultivator, who knelt on the ground with a respectful expression. Come, follow me out there. The gaze of Blood Crow Palace's lord was ice-cold as he said in a chilling voice, I want to see who's the one who dares lay a hand on my disciple. I'll make him pay with his blood. Dongling Valley. The blood-robed youth perished in a pool of blood. The time it took for 3 rounds was merely a couple of seconds. It was too short. The 2 golden core reinforcements were too far away to be able to arrive in time to save the blood-robed youth. Upon seeing this scene, the 2 golden cores were dumbfounded. Both of them seemed to have thought of something terrifying as the color drained from their faces. Looking terrible, their bodies shivered faintly. The blood-robed youth was the only legacy disciple of Blood Crow Palace's lord. They arrived at Dongling Valley while escorting the blood-robed youth. Now that the blood-robed youth had died tragically here, the palace lord might take it out on them in a fit of anger. Their only chance of survival was on the green-robed cultivator not far away. They had to capture this person alive and present him to the palace lord. That was their hope for survival. Swash! Swash! Their eyes turned bloodshot and their faces were filled with killing intent. Circulating the spirit energy in their dantian fervently, they charged in Su Zimo's direction at top speed. On the other side, Su Zimo had exhausted almost all of his stamina after killing the blood-robed youth in 3 moves and was now panting. Be it in terms of combination, strength or timing, those 3 moves were executed to his limits. He had managed to kill a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator in a one-on-one fight. Even if Su Zimo was in peak condition, he may not have been able to produce that feat. If not the fact that he was able to unleash a formidable power of blood chi, given his lesser mastery of the organ's refinement section as well as the blood-robed youth's loss of courage resulting in a weakness in his aura, it would be hard to tell who would have been the victor. After killing the blood-robed youth, Su Zimo turned around and looked at the 2 golden cores nearby with a hint of mockery in his eyes. Swoosh! Flicking his sleeves, a supreme-grade flying sword shot out. Shing! The first thing Su Zimo did was to cut open Yu Fei's chest with the flying sword to retrieve the demon beast inner core within. Right after, he sliced off the blood-robed youth's head and took the latter's storage bag. This person is dead and his head is with me. If you want it, come and take it. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo held the blood-robed youth's head in his hands as he threw his head back and laughed uproariously with a loud voice that rang in all directions. Su Zimo's current location was quite far away. He was almost at the boundaries of Dongling Valley. Coupled with the fact that he had killed the blood-robed youth in 3 moves, that speed was so fast that no one else had noticed it other than the 2 golden cores that arrived. However, his voice was reverberating through Dongling Valley endlessly right now and everyone could hear it clear and well. The clash between both sides met with a momentary pause. Be it the cultivators of Blood Crow Palace or disciples of Ethereal Peak, Regardless of their cultivation realms, they glanced at Su Zimo's direction subconsciously. Following that, everyone's expressions changed drastically. The disciples of Ethereal Peak let out joyous looks. However, the masses of Blood Crow Palace were pale as a sheet, looking ashen. "Capture that person alive. Don't let him escape." Peng Fei roared in anger. There were now only 8 golden cores of Blood Crow Palace that were surrounding Wen Xian and Elder Yu. The moment they heard Peng Fei's roar, 2 more golden cores left the battlefield and sprinted in the direction of Su Zimo with lightning speed. Poof, poof, poof. The pressure on Wen Xian decreased drastically. He took advantage of a golden core's absent-minded state and shot forth with his phenomenon. Many slender raindrops poured down on that person's body, producing countless bloody holes on his body. With a dimmed gaze, that person fell from midair. Peng Fei grit his teeth. He had planned on capturing Su Zimo personally, but now he had no choice but to stay here. Swallowing a mouthful of elixirs, Peng Fei frantically circulated his spirit energy and activated the power of the storm, hoping to kill Wen Xian and Elder Yu as soon as possible. In the air, there were many blood-eyed crows that were surrounding the remaining 40-odd disciples of Ethereal Peak initially. Now, all the blood-eyed crows swarmed in Su Zimo's direction with bloodshot eyes. More than half of the hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace were diverted away as well. As such, the pressure on the people of Ethereal Peak decreased immensely. Everyone suddenly caught sight of a glimmer of hope. A sliver of life. Due to the death of the blood-robed youth, the entire situation had taken on a slight mysterious change. The battlefield was in a mess. No matter what, Qin Yu and Ji Chengtian were legacy disciples of Ethereal Peak. One at 5 Meridian and the other at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment, they were extremely strong. As long as they could make use of this situation to escape from Dongling Valley and send a message to the sect, everyone would have a chance of surviving. On the other side, there were now 4 golden cores that were rushing at Su Zimo. The blood-eyed crows in the skies were swarming over alongside more than half of the Foundation establishment cultivators on the ground. That massive army was akin to a raging wave that was surging over. In the face of the oncoming wave, Su Zimo appeared extremely minuscule and he was almost drowned by the dense crowd and the blood-eyed crows that covered the skies. One could imagine his ending. Chapter 225, Blood Escape. Chapter 225, Blood Escape. Qin Yu turned back and looked in Su Zimo's direction with tightly gripped fists and a complicated gaze. "Bro!" Little Fatty could not help but exclaim. Lung Ro let out a reluctant expression. Everyone of Ethereal Peak knew that this sliver of life was obtained single-handedly by Su Zimo with his life on the line. Right now, none of the golden cores bothered if they were dead or alive. Even the Foundation establishment cultivators blocking their way were reduced by more than half. Almost everyone's attention was drawn by Su Zimo. "Hurry, let's go!" Qin Yu clenched his teeth and waved his arm, shouting in a low voice. If he were to be hesitant and indecisive at a moment like this, he would only cause everyone to die. Joining forces, Qin Yu and Ji Chengtian walked at the front and released their spirit arts continuously. With the help of the sect's secret skills, their flying swords shuttled through the battlefield, splattering blood everywhere. Even though the people of Ethereal Peak were covered in injuries, all of them endured their pains and gathered their spirits. They followed closely behind the 2 of them and charged their ways out of Dongling Valley. On the other side, Su Zimo was in a bad state. When he used the Fiend Suppression Seal previously, almost all the spirit energy in his Dantian was drained. Thereafter, he was mentally and physically exhausted resisting the corrosion of the blood slave art. Finally, he burst forth at his peak and killed the blood-robed youth cleanly in 3 rounds, expending the last of his stamina. Su Zimo was at his weakest right now. Not far away, 4 golden cores sped over with a boiling killing intent followed by a dense swarm of blood-eyed crows and hundreds of Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace. Dust and smoke billowed as murderous intent filled the skies. Despite the circumstances, there was no sign of panic on Su Zimo's face. His eyes were calm and his expression was composed. He was channeling a secret skill. There was a blood refinement fiend sutra etched on the lid of the coffin of the fiend's sex inheritance ground. Originating from the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, this secret skill was called Blood Escape. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra detailed the use of bloodlines and described how one should activate the power of bloodlines. Blood Escape was no exception. Once released, Blood Escape would burn up a third of the body's bloodline in exchange for a momentary speed burst, allowing one to escape hundreds of kilometers away. Of course, there were extremely obvious side effects to Blood Escape as well. By burning up a third of one's bloodline, be it humans or demons, they would turn extremely weak. Their limbs would go cold and breathing would become significantly difficult. In fact, they might even faint. How long a person would remain in that weakened state depended on their individual physiques. The stronger one's physique was, the faster they would recover to normal. However, given ordinary circumstances, it would take at least 10 to 14 days of recuperation for a complete recovery. With the onslaught of the massive army ahead, Su Zimo could only choose to turn and escape. However, the direction behind him was in the opposite direction of Ethereal Peak. If he were to blood escape hundreds of kilometers in that direction, the distance between Su Zimo and Ethereal Peak would only increase even further. Left with no other choice, Su Zimo could only turn and escape. Channeling the mental cultivation technique of blood escape, Su Zimo conjured hand seals and bit his tongue gently, causing a stream of essence blood to spray. Dong, dong, dong. His heart suddenly started to beat rapidly, as if it was about to leap out of his chest. It was as though someone was drumming from the heavens, giving off a dull and powerful sound. Each time his heart beat, it would circulate a fresh stream of blood around his limbs. On that stream of blood, a flame burned in secret. It was extremely strange and emitted endless power. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and activated Divine Steed Fleeting, dashing out of Dongling Valley. Swash! He turned into a sanguine flash of light and in almost the blink of an eye, disappeared from everyone's sights. It was too fast. Everyone was stunned for a moment, looking lost and confused. Several seconds later, the 4 golden cores were the first to realize what happened. They released all their strength and chased in the direction where Su Zimo vanished. A secret skill as such is definitely using his vitality in exchange for a momentary burst in strength. He won't be able to last long. Chase after him. That's right. Using that secret skill will definitely weaken him extremely once he comes to a stop. The several golden cores in midair were sharp and quickly saw through the essence of blood escape. One of the golden cores yelled, "Blood Crow Army, track that man down. After you find him, don't alert him. Just stay on his trail and wait for our reinforcement." Caw caw. An ear-piercing screech broke out from the sea of blood-eyed crows in the skies, as if responding. Soon, many blood-eyed crows delved into the voids and disappeared. Even though the blood-eyed crows were only Foundation Establishment spirit demons, their speed of flying through the air was not inferior to golden cores. Su Zimo ran with all his might. Although he did not turn back, he could guess that the group of unknown cultivators would definitely not give up. They were definitely hot on his tail. His blood was still burning. Su Zimo had to ensure that he broke free of their pursuit before a third of his blood was burnt up. Blood escape could increase his speed by multiples in a short period of time. However, it wasn't an infinite increase and it was based on the cultivator's foundation. At the end of the day, Su Zimo was only a Foundation Establishment cultivator. In other words, even after using blood escape, Su Zimo may not be much faster than golden cores in terms of speed. Golden cores were an entire cultivation realm above him. Before long, Su Zimo arrived at a dense forest. After sprinting for a while, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and with a flash, pounced onto a leopard nearby that could not dodge in time. That leopard could only be considered as a wild beast that had just gained sentience. Even though it bore some intellect in its eyes, it did not know how to cultivate yet. Wrapping the head of the blood-robed youth around the tail of the leopard, Su Zimo threatened it. "The further you run, the better. Don't take it off." The leopard could read the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes and it trembled in fear, nodding furiously. The moment Su Zimo released his grip, the leopard left in fear. When it saw that it was far enough, it fled like the wind. Su Zimo turned back and sneered coldly. He had to do something to distract his pursuers. Su Zimo believed that the leopard was enough to disturb his pursuers and send them into panic such that they could not track him down. Taking a deep breath of air, he continued sprinting ahead. After some time, the energy produced by blood escape was expended thoroughly. This meant that Su Zimo's bloodline had been burnt by a full 1/3. The moment he came to a stop, Su Zimo felt the entire world spin and he almost fell to the ground. He tried his best to compose his breathing, clutching his fists to maintain the clarity in his mind as he staggered forth. He could not just sleep there. He had not gotten out of danger just yet. Su Zimo had to look for a relatively secluded place and set up some simple array formations before he could rest assured that he was concealed. Before long, he found a cave at the foot of a mountain not far away. Heading in, Su Zimo took a look inside and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there were no demon beasts. Given his current state, even if he encountered a spirit beast, he would probably have to engage in a tough battle. Chapter 226. Nowhere to Run. Chapter 226. Nowhere to Run. Su Zimo fell to the ground, his bones and tendons feeling as though they were about to split. Enduring the pain, he took Night Spirit out of his robes carefully and hugged it in his embrace. He was worried about Night Spirit. Even though Yu Fei's lifeblood was greatly drained because of that swipe to his throat, he was still a golden core spirit demon after all. That counterattack before his death was extremely terrifying. Even if Su Zimo was the one in Night Spirit's situation, he could not guarantee that he could survive. However, Su Zimo was stunned when he took Night Spirit out. Back in Dongling Valley, he saw with his own eyes how Night Spirit's waist was caved in through Yu Fei's punch. It clearly suffered serious injuries to its organs and was coughing out blood, as if it could die at any time. But now, Night Spirit's body had returned to normal. Curled up in Su Zimo's embrace, Night Spirit was no longer bleeding from its mouth, breathing slowly and steadily. When it sensed Su Zimo's gaze, Night Spirit suddenly raised its head and blinked its tiny eyes. Pitch black like gemstones, they looked at Su Zimo filled with life. The man and beast looked at one another. Ha ha! When he saw that Night Spirit was fine, Su Zimo was delighted and could not help but laugh out loud. Hia! As if sensing Su Zimo's joy, Night Spirit opened its mouth slightly and cried in response. Su Zimo carried Night Spirit up and examined it carefully. He was shocked to discover that Night Spirit had an extremely strong self-regeneration ability. Even though it was not fully recovered, the wounds on its internal organs were already beginning to heal and its broken bones were reconnected. From their escape from Dongling Valley till now, Night Spirit had not consumed any elixirs and was completely reliant on its own body's ability to repair and adjust. It was less than a month since Night Spirit had been born. Of course, the greater Night Spirit's potential was, the more stringent the conditions were for it to grow. If it was a ferocious beast cub, its parents would naturally be pure-blooded ferocious beasts as well. Extremely powerful, they could provide sufficient food and resources for the ferocious beast cubs. However, Su Zimo was merely a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator right now, and honestly could not provide much for Night Spirit. He took out Yu Fei's inner core from his storage bag and placed it under Night Spirit's nose, wanting to feed it. If not for Night Spirit's assassination, Su Zimo would have been reduced to a blood slave of the blood-robed youth by now. Therefore, he did not hesitate nor feel pained in the slightest bit feeding Night Spirit the inner core. Twitching its nose slightly, Night Spirit sneezed and turned its head away, pouting its lips with disdain in its eyes. Burp. When he saw that, Su Zimo was speechless. That inner core could be considered the most precious thing he had. He did not expect that Night Spirit would look down on it. You must be crazy, letting up on such a good thing. Having narrowly escaped death along with the fact that Night Spirit survived, Su Zimo was in a great mood and could not help but chide jokingly. He put away the inner core casually, prepared to consume it himself later. I'll put you down first. Let me go set up some array formations and we'll hide here for a couple of days. Su Zimo told Night Spirit. Unexpectedly, Night Spirit arched its body and tried to burrow into Su Zimo's embrace repeatedly, as if it was most comfortable there. Unable to reject, Su Zimo stuffed it inside his robes again and came to the entrance of the cave to begin setting up array formations. After burning a third of his blood, Su Zimo was extremely weak by now. However, he did not dare to rest. He had to make every second count and lay out a couple of array formations before he could set himself at ease. Su Zimo had just drawn a couple of formation patterns when he came to a sudden stop. An extremely strange feeling surged in his heart, as if he had been targeted. There was no danger or warning signs. However, Su Zimo felt that something was amiss. It seemed like there was a pair of eyes hidden somewhere staring at him. He remained expressionless and continued to draw his formation patterns. However, most of his attention and gaze were constantly scanning the surroundings, trying to find the origin of that unpleasant feeling. After a while, Su Zimo found nothing. Did I imagine it? His eyes flickered and he frowned in deep thought. It would be best if he had imagined it. Otherwise. Right then, Night Spirit popped its head out from Su Zimo's chest. Here! Night Spirit called out. Su Zimo was in deep thought and did not pay attention to Night Spirit's cries. Here! Here! After a while, Night Spirit cried out 2 more times, seeing that Su Zimo was ignoring him. It used its paws to scratch on Su Zimo's chest gently, but it did not extend its claws. What's wrong? Coming to his senses, Su Zimo lowered his head and asked. Night Spirit's head was raised as it looked in the direction of the sky with an icy gaze. There was a tiny speck reflected in its pitch-black pupils. Oh! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he raised his head suddenly. Up above in the skies, there was a black dot hidden within the clouds, faintly discernible. Given that distance, if it was any normal Foundation establishment cultivator, their eyesight would not be enough to make out what that figure dancing in the skies was. However, Su Zimo's eyesight was extremely powerful and he recognized that the black dot was a blood-eyed crow. Not only that, there were even more black dots gathering towards that area in the clouds. With the blood-eyed crows giving directions, it won't be long before Golden Core finds his way there. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt a chill run down his spine. He had not managed to shake off his pursuers at all. If he had not sensed that something was amiss and Night Spirit discovered the source of his feelings, he might have been surrounded and killed here without even knowing why. Escape. Su Zimo's first reaction was to continue escaping. However, the world was so huge. Where could he escape to? There were too many blood-eyed crows. In addition, they were fast and had a keen sense of smell. No matter where Su Zimo escaped, it was inevitable that he would be caught. The blood-eyed crows were the eyes of his enemies and they were everywhere. This meant that Su Zimo would always be under the enemy's surveillance. There was nowhere to run. Furthermore, he was in an extremely bad condition. The blood that he had burnt earlier had not recovered and he no longer had any energy left. What should he do? Su Zimo closed his eyes and tried his best to compose himself, thinking hard of a way to break out of this situation. He believed that there must be a way for him to escape from the surveillance of the blood-eyed crows. After a while, Su Zimo suddenly opened his eyes. He had an idea. He took out the demon beast inner core from his storage bag and swallowed it whole. Su Zimo was prepared to use blood escape once more. Making use of blood escape 2 times in a row meant that he would have to burn up 2/3 of his blood and there was a high chance he could die. However, he had no other choice. He could only consume the inner core in advance to prevent any mishaps. Right now, Su Zimo was at his weakest. If he did not make use of blood escape, he would not be able to escape far and would definitely be caught by the golden cores behind. Taking out a map from his storage bag, Su Zimo took a good look at it. Soon, he put away the map and channeled blood escape. His body turned into a sanguine light as he made a slight change of direction and dashed for it. Chapter 227, Jishui River. Chapter 227, Jishui River. This time, Su Zimo was no longer running aimlessly. There was only one place to escape from the blood-eyed crow surveillance. Jishui River. Blood-eyed crows were Foundation establishment spirit demons after all. They did not have inner cores and could not internalize their breathings. As such, they naturally could not dive into Jishui River. Su Zimo was different. He had both immortality and demonic cultivations. Although he did not have an inner core, he could use his spirit energy to form a protective barrier and repel water. The map indicated that Jishui River ran through the entire territory of the Great Zhou dynasty. No one knew where Jishui River began and ended. The map did not indicate it as well. However, that was not important. What Suzumo had to do was to dive into Jishui River and drift with the flow. That was how he could escape the tracking of the blood-eyed crows entirely. Suzumo sprinted the entire way, running through the night. The next morning, he finally arrived at the riverbed of Jishui River. The moment he arrived, Suzumo's expression was pale and his consciousness was gradually blurring. If he had not consumed that demon beast inner core, he would have been a dead man by now, making use of blood escape twice. No matter how strong one's physique was, they would not be able to withstand burning 2/3 of their blood essence. This time, he was almost completely exhausted. Suzumo staggered and lost control of his body and balance, falling forward head first into the river. Broop, broop, broop. A series of bubbles appeared on the water surface. Stirred awake by the waters, Suzumo shook his head and struggled to stand up. His mind was slightly cleared up. Night Spirit tunneled out of Suzumo's robes, and after swimming a little in the river, it actually began to float. From the looks of it, Night Spirit was pretty adaptable to water as well. Suzumo grit his teeth and carried Night Spirit, conjuring a barrier of spirit energy with great effort. Finally, he leaped and disappeared completely into Jishui River. The river was cold. For someone who had burned most of his bloodline, that level of coldness was already seeping into his bones. Suzumo trembled from head to toe, hugging Night Spirit tightly with widened eyes as he dived down. He gathered his spirit and did not dare to be careless, wielding the supreme-grade flying sword in his left hand while surveying his surroundings constantly. Jishui River was not a friendly place. The danger inside was definitely not less than the forests in the vast wilderness. There were many powerful demon beasts lurking within Jishui River as well. If he was not careful, he might die here. Suzumo did not dare to dive too deep. Typically, stronger demon beasts would lurk in the deeper waters. Right now, Suzumo was surrounded mostly by chi condensation spirit demons that had just learned how to cultivate. The many aquatic demon beasts were truly dazzling to look at. All of those spirit beasts merely looked from afar, and none of them dared to approach casually. All of a sudden, as though they were frightened by something, the spirit beasts scattered at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, a danger rang in Suzumo's mind. The river surged in a slanted manner as a huge water column flowed in the opposite direction, filled with a ferocious killing intent and formidable aura. It was a spirit demon. A Foundation establishment spirit demon had appeared. Zing, zing, zing. Suzumo endured the pain in his dantian and forcefully injected spirit energy. His sword trembled continuously. The reason why Suzumo activated the flying sword right away was because he wanted to fight against that spirit demon. However, he suddenly put away the flying sword on second thought. Whoosh! The spirit beast emerged from the water and Suzumo could finally take a good look at it. Green Armored Crocodile. The green armored crocodile was one of the most common demon beasts in Jishui River. It earned its name thanks to the massively indestructible armor that lined its entire body and its massive size. Moving extremely fast in the waters, the green armored crocodile appeared before Suzumo almost in the blink of an eye. At that moment, Suzumo felt like he was facing a mountain instead of an aquatic demon beast. Swoosh! The moment it arrived before Suzumo, the green armored crocodile opened its massive mouth without a second thought and devoured Suzumo as a whole with ease alongside the river water. Suzumo stood inside the green armored crocodile's mouth. Even though he seemed incomparably small, he was extremely calm. Just as the lower jaw of the green armored crocodile was about to close, Suzumo drew out his supreme-grade flying sword again and activated the 4 spirit patterns on it. He said with a cold voice, "You better not move." At that moment, Night Spirit extended its claws and tapped its paws gently on the tongue of the green armored crocodile. It did not use much strength, but the green armored crocodile's tongue was already bleeding. "Listen to me now." Standing in the green armored crocodile's mouth, Suzumo said slowly, "Swim down along with Jishui River. I'm going to borrow your stomach for the time being. Once my body recovers, I'll leave. Besides, I promise I won't harm your life." The green armored crocodile had already cultivated to a spirit demon level and had gained sentience. Su Zimo believed that it would definitely understand his words. Indeed, after a momentary hesitation, the green-armored crocodile nodded its head. That was a good choice. It could either believe in Su Zimo, or it could die right away. Hugging Night Spirit, Su Zimo slid down the green-armored crocodile's throat into its stomach. At the same time, he crushed the protective talisman given to him by Long Ro. A barrier of light surrounded Su Zimo. Even though it was slightly smelly in the green-armored crocodile's stomach, it was a place undisturbed by anyone. It was the perfect hiding ground for him to calm down and recuperate in peace. If Su Zimo were to hug Night Spirit and continue flowing down Jishui River, he would have no time to recuperate. This arrangement was killing two birds with one stone. Su Zimo intended to stay in the green-armored crocodile's stomach for the time being. After he and Night Spirit's injuries were healed, he would leave and return to shore. Shaking its head and tail, the green-armored crocodile disappeared from where it was, swimming down the river. 3 days later. A large number of blood-eyed crows circled above Jishui River, densely packed and covering the skies. Peng Fei and the other cultivators who had participated in the Dongling Valley battle stood by the shore. They looked at the surging river with a terrible expression, remaining silent. Before they set off, they had 10 golden cores. Now they were only left with 6. Peng Fei's face was slightly pale. He seemed to be seriously injured and had rushed over before he could recover. The number of Foundation establishment cultivators had decreased by half as well. Caw, caw. Before long, an ear-piercing screech could be heard from the distant horizon. All the blood-eyed crows paused for a moment and split into 2 sides in the skies, as though they were welcoming a powerful existence. Before long, a gigantic, pitch-black blood crow king sped over. On its back was a middle-aged man dressed in blood-colored robes. Hands behind his back, his face was thin and his eyes were gloomy. Greetings, Palace Lord. The masses of Blood Crow Palace knelt on the ground hurriedly, lowering their heads and shivering from head to toe. None of them dared to make eye contact with the Palace Lord. Gritting his teeth, Peng Fei bolstered his courage and said, "Palace Lord, what happened was..." Peng Fei recounted everything that had happened in Dongling Valley. In reality, none of them saw how Yu Fei died. That was also the most confusing part of the entire situation. If Yu Fei did not die, the young master would not have died as well with the protection of a golden core spirit demon. Chapter 228. Turned into Dust. Chapter 228. Turned into Dust. You mean to say that a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator and a golden core spirit demon actually died in the hands of a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator despite their combined efforts, The Blood Crow Palace's lord looked at Peng Fei as his green eyes sparkled. Even though his tone was calm, it exuded an inexplicable coldness. With so many people, it was supposed to be a one-sided massacre. None of the people from Dongling Valley should have been able to escape. But, what happened, Against the questioning of the Palace Lord, Peng Fei and the others lowered their heads and no one dared to reply. The air seemed to be frozen and layered with a murderous intent. The Palace Lord exuded a terrifying aura of authority that was impossible to resist. At that moment, all the cultivators of Blood Crow Palace that were kneeling down felt that they were insignificantly small in the face of the Palace Lord, as though they were facing a divine god. I can understand if it was a golden core who had managed to escape. But, how did a mere Foundation establishment cultivator manage to escape despite being surrounded by so many people, I want to know just how that Foundation establishment cultivator had managed to escape. The Palace Lord's voice turned louder and sharper. Many cultivators revealed looks of pain but none of them dared to say anything. A bunch of trash. The Palace Lord's gaze was icy as his glabella flickered with a strange glow. Eyes laden with killing intent, he stretched his palms slowly and pressed down on the air in the direction of Peng Fei and the others. The initially flowing river seemed to be under immense pressure as it stopped mysteriously. Poof! There was a crisp sound. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Peng Fei's body suddenly exploded into a blood mist. He was dead on the spot without even a corpse left. When they saw that, the people kneeling behind Peng Fei were scared out of their wits. They felt as if someone was grabbing their hearts and they even forgot to breathe. Someone like Peng Fei who had managed to cultivate a golden core phenomenon was dead just like that without even a chance to explain himself. The gaze of the palace lord swept past everyone coldly. Each time his gaze swept past someone, that person's face would turn terribly pale as if he could smell the aura of death. I'll give you guys a chance to atone for your mistakes. Track down Su Zimo. Dead or alive, I want to see him. The moment the palace lord's voice rang out, everyone felt a sense of relief as though they had just passed through the gates of life and death briefly. Soon, everyone dispersed. Some of them dived into Jishui River while others looked around the shore for clues. Caw, caw. The Blood Crow King suddenly raised its head and cried. As if they had received some instructions, the many blood-eyed crows circling in the skies dispersed. The Blood Crow King walked forward and said in a dark voice, "Master, I've ordered them to search along Jishui River. However, the river is truly too long and it's hard to determine where Su Zimo will get on shore." "No matter, I have my methods," the palace lord said indifferently. The Blood Crow King seemed to have thought of something as its eyes lit up. It nodded and said, "That's right. Young master used blood slave art on that person. Even though he's dead, Su Zimo's body must contain remnant energy of the curse. As long as you search for it using your secret skill, we'll definitely be able to determine that person's location." "That's right. Jishui River has a way of blocking my secret skills probing." A vicious glint flashed in the palace lord's eyes as he said coldly, "However, as long as Su Zimo leaves Jishui River, I'll definitely know about it." Su Zimo did not know it at that point of time. However, his accidental decision to dive into Jishui River to escape the surveillance of the blood-eyed crows had instead caused him to avoid a momentary calamity. Inside the green-armored crocodile's stomach, Su Zimo's consciousness was already fading out. The damage to his body was too great after using blood escape twice in a row. Su Zimo tried his best to stay awake. Opening the blood-robed youth's storage bag, he did not even look and poured everything out. He searched for a few bottles of healing elixirs and swallowed them before putting away the rest of the items. He then started to heal himself. Before this, Su Zimo had consumed a demon beast's inner core and a massive source of essence was sealed within his body. With the help of the inner core and the many miraculous elixirs, Su Zimo began cultivating before long. Huff huff. Boom boom. The tiger-leopard thunder sound sounded. Essence chi grew endlessly within his 5 organs and his bones and tendons crackled repeatedly. New blood regenerated and flowed continuously, bringing forth new life to Su Zimo's body. Time quickly passed. After a long while, Su Zimo's body finally recovered. His injuries had healed. Whoosh. Bang. Boom. Boom. The bloodline in his body surged like a tsunami. That surging bloodline contained endless flashes of lightning mixed with dull, resounding sounds of thunder that made one's heart rattle. The stomach of the green-armored crocodile was filled with demonic chi so thick that it almost materialized. All of those demonic chi were produced through Su Zimo's cultivation. To its shock, the green-armored crocodile discovered that its body was also improving under the tempering of that demonic chi. To think that this was a demon beast with a core. I was truly mistaken. The green-armored crocodile thought that Su Zimo was a demon beast with a core that had merely taken on a human form. After some time, Su Zimo opened his eyes. Filled with a bedazzling divine light, it was like a shooting star streaking through the dark night. Su Zimo's robes around his chest area moved and a little head popped out, peering with its bright and pitch-black eyes that were filled with spirit. The man and beast looked at one another and Su Zimo smiled. It was always a joyous event for one to survive a disaster. After refining the demon beast inner core, Su Zimo made progress on the organs refinement section as well. Although there was still a long way to go before attaining greater mastery, it was already not easy for him to get to this stage. I wonder if Little Fatty, Lang Ro and the others managed to escape. How are Peak Master Wen Xian and Elder Yu doing now? The thought of everyone from Ethereal Peak had Su Zimo sighing inwardly. Till now, they did not know the background of the faction that attacked them at Dongling Valley. However, it was clear that the other party was prepared. On the one hand, the Battle of Dongling Valley was for revenge. After all, it was Su Zimo who killed all the cultivators from this faction outside Linfeng City. However, the greatest possibility was that the other party was doing it for the sect competition. In the sect competition, there would be ranking rolls for spirit, elixir, talisman and weapon refinement. Only the top 10 of each role had the rights to enter the ancient battlefield. Even though the ancient battlefield was extremely dangerous, it was extremely important for every single Foundation establishment cultivator. With danger came opportunities. In every single sect competition, Ethereal Sect would occupy the most number of spots for the spirit ranking. At the minimum, they occupied 3 spots. Now that all 3 legacy disciples of Ethereal Peak were gathered, what would it imply if the blood-robed youth had managed to turn them all into his blood slave and have them under his control? That would mean that the blood-robed youth would have gained 3 spots at the very least for the sect competition. Given his own strength as a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, the blood-robed youth would have been able to occupy another spot. That was a total of 4 spots. If the blood-robed cultivator enslaved a few more powerful Meridian cultivators, the spirit ranking roll would most likely be filled with his men. In fact, that was also what the Blood Crow Palace's lord wanted. It was to ensure the young master's safety in the ancient battlefield. Unfortunately, all those plans had turned into dust. Before he could die on the ancient battlefield, the Blood Crow young master had already perished outside. Chapter 229, Primordial Ruin. Chapter 229, Primordial Ruin. After recovering from his injuries, Xueqi did not linger in the stomach of the green-armored crocodile. Arriving on shore, Xueqi rode on his flying sword and surveyed his surroundings before taking out his map to compare against it. As he had expected, he was even further away from Ethereal Peak. With his current location, it would probably take him a month of speeding without rest or sleep if he wanted to return to Ethereal Peak. Oh! Right then, Xueqi frowned. A stabbing pain surged in his mind without any warning. Right after, Xueqi's vision went into a trance. It was as if he saw the already dead blood-robed youth standing before him, smiling with a weird gaze and a sinister grin. Xueqi's eyes flashed with a strange green glint that lingered for a brief moment before disappearing. Squinting his eyes, Xueqi looked worse for the wear. Even though the blood-robed youth was already dead, there was still some remnant power of the blood slave art left in Xueqi's body. Furthermore, he had not noticed it when he was recuperating previously. The cultivators of this mysterious faction had access to extremely treacherous methods that were unpredictable and impossible to defend against. Was it a coincidence for that strange stabbing pain to occur, or was someone manipulating it from behind the scenes? Xueqi's eyes flickered and he frowned in deep thought. He was more inclined to think that someone was behind this. After all, he did not feel that stabbing pain back when he was in the stomach of the green-armored crocodile, and it appeared not long after he left Jishui River. Everything was way too coincidental. Moreover, if someone was manipulating it from behind the scenes, what was the other party's motive? Are they trying to determine if I'm alive, or are they trying to track me down and locate me through it? After pondering for a while, Xueqi let out a long breath and muttered softly, "These guys are really impossible to shake off." If his theory was correct, it would imply that he could avoid the other party's detection inside Jishui River. However, Jishui River could not stay in Jishui River forever. He had to come up with a solution. To sever the root, he only had 2 options. The first option was to try and think up a method to purge that sinister power within his body. The second option was to think of a way to get rid of his pursuers. Both options were not exactly realistic, and Xueqi could not do it with his strength alone. He had no clue how to go about the first option. As for the second option, Xueqi had a vague idea. Naturally, the second option was way too treacherous and there was a high chance he could be implicated as well. Spreading the map open once more, Xueqi searched for his next landing spot. The map indicated some dangerous areas. Some indicated the source of danger while others were vague and brief. Among them, there was a dark blood-colored cross drawn on one of the spots. It was proof that that was the most dangerous area. Xueqi did not know much about the place other than it was a ruin. A ruin of the Primordial era. Because the Primordial era was too long ago, it did not leave many things behind. However, there was definitely something unique about this Primordial ruin for it to be able to survive till this day. A vicious glint flashed in Zimo's eyes as he put away the map and sped towards the primordial ruin. Let's see what sort of danger lies within this primordial ruin and whether it's enough to destroy you guys. Zimo planned on leading his pursuers to that primordial ruin. It was almost evening. Zimo did not rest at all and sprinted the entire way. He did not know how many cultivators were chasing him, nor did he know what their cultivation realms were. However, the earlier he arrived at the primordial ruin, the greater his chances of being able to set a trap and kill his pursuers. Morning. Travel-worn, Zimo finally arrived at the periphery of the primordial ruin. When he arrived, Zimo was shocked to discover that there were quite a number of cultivators around him. There were chi condensation, foundation establishment, and even golden core cultivators who stood floating in the air. At a glance, there were tens of thousands of cultivators gathered. It was extremely dense and shocking. A few of the cultivators were very likely even nascent soul-perfected lords. At nascent soul realm, the spirit-peering art could no longer reveal one's cultivation realm. Zimo merely had a feeling that the auras of those people were extremely terrifying and even surpassed the golden cores. Something's wrong. Zimo was confused. Initially, he thought that these people were from the mysterious faction and were specially waiting for him here. If that was the case, the mysterious faction's methods would be truly unpredictable. However, after observing them in secret for a while, Zimo discovered that these people were clearly not from the same sect. They came from all over the place. Zimo was even more puzzled. Even though he had yet to actually step foot into the territory of the primordial ruin, why were all those cultivators gathered here? Of course, in order to hide his identity, Zimo had long put his sect badge into his storage bag as well. Fellow Taoist, what are you guys gathering here for? Zimo casually pulled out a chi condensation itinerant cultivator and asked. The moment the itinerant cultivator saw that Zimo was a foundation establishment cultivator, he let out a respectful expression. The person cupped his fists. Fellow Taoist, you do not understand. A month ago, a golden beam of light shot forth into the skies from the territory of the primordial ruin ahead. It lasted for a long time and even brought forth lightning and thunder. Before Zimo could speak, another itinerant cultivator passing by could not help but chime in. I heard that it was rainbow-colored and extremely extraordinary. It said that there were even sounds of dragons roaring and phoenixes crying. Tisk, I've seen a true dragon before. Even though it was just a scale and half a claw, it was shocking enough. That single scale was bigger than our entire bodies and that claw was longer and sharper than our flying swords. A cultivator beside him joined the crowd in a seemingly important manner. His spit flew everywhere and his eyes glowed as he spoke. It was clear that he was exaggerating as everything he said blew further and further out of proportion. Not really understanding, Zimo asked again, So that proves that there must be treasures in the primordial ruin ahead. Furthermore, the treasure has just appeared. There's another possibility. A powerful cave abode restriction within the primordial ruin may have disappeared, causing a phenomenon due to the many treasures within. Yes. It might be a sect from the primordial era that has left behind some inheritance for me to inherit. The surrounding cultivators discussed their guesses. However, I heard that the primordial ruin is an extremely dangerous place? Zimo asked again. Yes. Someone nodded. There have always been such rumors. However, not many people know exactly the sort of danger that lies within. Ever since the ancient times, there have been cultivators dying here almost every year. It's inevitable that there's danger. However, since it's a primordial ruin, it means that many of the things left behind are from the primordial era. If you manage to find a treasure, you might just soar impossibly. At the mention of that, many cultivators looked excited and their eyes lit up. Any item left behind from the primordial era that was still intact would definitely be a treasure. Chapter 230. Massacre. Chapter 230. Massacre. Over the past month, cultivators were constantly streaming over from outside the primordial ruin. On the one hand, it was because of an ancient treasure that might have appeared within. On the other hand, the primordial ruin was way too attractive for many cultivators. The ancient battlefield was a secret ground left behind from the ancient era, forming a separate dimension of its own. If the ancient battlefield was enough for many cultivators to covet over, what about a secret ground that was left behind from the primordial era? Many cultivators encountered heavenly-defying opportunities from the ancient battlefield and shot to the top because of it. If one were to obtain opportunities from the primordial ruin, what sort of outcome would that be? Cultivators may find themselves obtaining the potential to dominate the world. Sects may find themselves leaping to become the strongest sect within the entire Great Zhou dynasty. In fact, they might even turn into the top sect of the entire northern region of Tianhuang mainland and be ranked on par with the immortal sects. Of the tens of thousands of cultivators, the majority were itinerant cultivators, but there were some factions from sects as well. Of them, Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect were the strongest. In the Great Zhou dynasty, those sects were only second to the 5 major sects, and Su Zimo had heard of them before as well. The few nascent souls were from those 2 sects. Roar! Not far away, a roar suddenly sounded. A golden lion with a terrifying aura rushed over. It had a massive body and an intimidating presence, glaring with its eyes that were as large as bronze bells in a cold manner. That golden lion was extraordinary, and it was clear that this was a spirit demon that had cultivated an inner core. Many cultivators were shocked and scattered sparsely. Striding through the air, the golden lion came beside a nascent soul and lowered its head and body obediently. Yes. Nodding his head, the nascent soul leaped and rode it. Ta, ta, ta. A series of hurried hooves sounded. From the skies afar, a pure white horse with a single horn on its head sprinted over. It blew its nose repeatedly with an extremely fast speed, arriving beside another nascent soul. Before long, the beasts of the several nascent souls present arrived. All of those beasts possessed terrifying aura and were all spirit demons with inner cores. However, there was still a vague hint of fear in their eyes as the beasts looked towards the primordial ruin in the distance. Let's go! A nascent soul of Heaven Azura sect gave an order and led his disciples in the direction of the primordial ruin. Right after, a nascent soul of Purple Cloud sect led his disciples over as well. The primordial ruin is so dangerous. Should we observe from here first? If we continue observing and there's really a treasure, someone else might snatch it away first. Let's follow them then. This might be the last chance for us to follow a group of a nascent soul. Even if we fail to obtain a treasure, we'll have a higher chance of surviving as well. The remaining cultivators discussed, and soon, 2 major factions were formed. Most of the cultivators chose to follow in the tracks of Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect towards the primordial ruin. Only a small number of cultivators hesitated, planning on observing from where they were. Initially, Su Zimo had no intention of heading in so early. However, he had just discovered that there were traces of blood-eyed crows up in the skies. Furthermore, their numbers were growing. This meant that the closest blood-eyed crows had already caught up. It won't be long before his pursuers arrived at where he was. I can't delay any more. A vicious glint flashed in Su Zimo's eyes. If he was targeted outside the primordial ruin, he would truly have nowhere to escape. Mixing within the crowd, Su Zimo headed for the direction of the primordial ruin. A large, dense and dark forest stood in the periphery of the primordial ruin. The closer they were to the primordial ruin, the denser the trees were as an ancient aura was exuded. Every single tree was extremely thick. Extending to the skies, their trunks would require more than 10 people hugging around to surround. As the cold breeze blew, scattered sunlight peered through the dense leaves, giving everyone some warmth. The group of cultivators was massive and amounted to tens of thousands, looking rather imposing. Despite that, they seemed insignificantly small in the face of this primordial forest. Unknowingly, Night Spirit had burrowed out. It laid against Su Zimo's chest and stuck its head out, surveying the place coldly with its pitch-black eyes. Even the golden lion, unicorn and other beasts with inner cores that the nascent souls rode on walked through that primordial forest with fear and caution. However, Night Spirit did not seem daunted in the slightest bit. All of a sudden, a miserable scream was heard from the front. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he stopped in his tracks and looked over. Not far ahead, an anaconda coiled around the branches of a tree, and its body was almost one with the tree. If not for that fact that the anaconda was chomping on a few people in its mouth, causing a blood mist to spew out, even Su Zimo would not have been able to detect it with his eyesight. That anaconda was way too big. A large part of it was hidden in the leaves, but just the exposed portion alone was more than 100 feet. Those few cultivators were not even enough to fill the gaps in its teeth. The most terrifying thing was that even golden cores were defenseless as their bodies were crushed with a single chomp and devoured whole. Bang! The sleeves of a nascent soul cultivator swayed as he struck suddenly, causing a terrifying force to surge out and land on the anaconda's body heavily. The anaconda's body was slanted by the impact, causing several pieces of scales to fall and revealing the flesh underneath. However, instead of retreating, the anaconda became even more ferocious as it let out a cold and cruel look in its eyes. Pest! Suddenly, the anaconda opened its mouth and sucked as though it was about to swallow the entire world. A strong wind howled. The gigantic turbulence was almost materialized like a sword and saber. Gushing forth, even the branches of the tree were snapped as leaves fell. There was no way weaker cultivators could control their bodies from being sucked into the anaconda's mouth. This was the true anaconda eclipse. Even though Su Zimo had cultivated this, he was still immensely shocked to see it right now. Bastard, you're courting death. Another nascent soul cultivator hollered and struck, causing 3 flying swords to shoot out. Those 3 flying swords carried an extremely terrifying force with them that far surpassed the scope of spirit arts. As the 3 flying swords were about to enter the anaconda's mouth, the nascent soul cultivator that attacked seemed to have realized something as his expression changed. Not good. Hurry, disperse. He exclaimed as he waved his robes and swept away the 3 flying swords he shot out, fleeing into the distance immediately as well. Su Zimo's eyes twitched. There were 2 fist-sized bags protruding from the head of the anaconda, looking like a pair of horns. It's not an anaconda, it's a flood dragon. If it was an anaconda, it could only be considered as a remnant beast. However, if it had managed to cultivate into a flood dragon, it would be equivalent to a pure-blooded ferocious beast. The few nascent souls in the group fled into the distance immediately, and the massive army of cultivators behind them did not dare to linger as they followed close behind. The crowd was in a mess as everyone tried their best to escape. Bang! The tail of the flood dragon descended suddenly, causing a bloody mist to burst forth in the air as it crashed into the crowd. It was too tragic. Hundreds of cultivators perished instantly. Be it chi condensation, foundation establishment or golden core cultivators, all of them were like ants in the face of this flood dragon and could not withstand a single blow. And at that moment, everyone had yet to step foot into the primordial ruin. This meant that the massacre had just begun. Chapter 231, Tragic. Chapter 231. Tragic. The primordial forest was 100 times more dangerous than the Tsonglang mountain range. Any random demon beasts here were pure-blooded ferocious beasts that could scare off nascent souls who did not dare to take them head-on. Escaping in the midst of the chaos, Su Zimo bent down and used all his limbs to slither through the dense forest nimbly like an anaconda. In such an environment, Su Zimo's chances of survival were far greater than other cultivators of the same level. Because, to a certain extent, Su Zimo was a demon as well. He knew the habits, methods and the laws of survival in the jungle. Initially, Su Zimo was somewhat worried that Night Spirit might run amok. It was true that Night Spirit had killed a golden core spirit demon back in Dongling Valley. However, Su Zimo was clear that Night Spirit's strength was far from that of a golden core spirit demon. Yet, to Su Zimo's surprise, not only was Night Spirit not afraid, it was extremely docile and stayed in his embrace obediently, merely peeking out with its head to survey the surroundings. Not long after, Su Zimo finally escaped from the attack range of the fierce flood dragon. Before he could catch a breather, Su Zimo's expression changed as he felt an even greater danger approaching rapidly. Not good. We have to leave this place as soon as possible. According to his experience of surviving in Tsonglang mountain range, the bloody smell of the battle behind them would attract even more powerful demon beasts. Those beasts would not be any weaker than that flood dragon. They should all be pure-blooded ferocious beasts. If he was trapped here by those pure-blooded ferocious beasts, he would definitely die. It was only now that Su Zimo understood why Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect did not chase away all the itinerant cultivators following them. The main goal of those two sects was to use the itinerant cultivators as bait to attract the ferocious beasts in this forest so that they could seize the opportunity to escape. The same way those itinerant cultivators were making use of the two sects were doing the same to them. The flood dragon's obstructions soon split the tens of thousands of cultivators into two camps. Among them, most of the cultivators were stopped by the flood dragon, while the few nascent soul cultivators of Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect led their disciples and sped towards the direction of the primordial ruin. Behind the two sects were some itinerant cultivators tagging along. Xueqi was one of them. Most of the cultivators who were able to break through the flood dragon's interception had capabilities of their own. Xueqi took a glance. Among the itinerant cultivators, there was indeed a cultivator that Xueqi had some slight impression of. That man was wearing grey robes and held a folding fan in his hands. Looking to be in his 30s, he had a pale, beardless face with a slightly rotund body and ordinary features. However, his eyes were particularly spirited. When they were outside, Xueqi had a short chat with this person. This was somebody who was full of nonsense and could even boast to the nines. Previously, the comments regarding the dragon's roars of the primordial ruin and how a true dragon's scales were larger than a human came from this person. There was no one who believed in those exaggerated words of his. Xueqi had investigated this person's cultivation realm, and it was merely at early-stage foundation establishment. He's got some means. Xueqi nodded silently. To be fair, Xueqi was able to catch up to this point purely because of his demonic cultivation techniques. As for this grey-robed cultivator, the fact that he was able to get here with the strength of an early-stage foundation establishment was indeed impressive. Seemingly sensing something, the grey-robed cultivator turned back and glanced at Xueqi, smiling in an extremely friendly manner. Right then, another commotion broke out before them. In the forest, a huge tiger leaped out. Its body was dozens of feet tall and it lunged at the crowd instantly with an apparent ferocity. What was even scarier was that the tiger had 9 tails. 9-tailed, tiger-shaped. Xueqi recalled for a moment, his expression serious as he said slowly, "Pure-blooded ferocious beast, Lu Wu." The grey-robed cultivator frowned at the same time and muttered, "To think that it's a Lu Wu." Lu Wu was one of the ancient ferocious beasts. Born with 9 tails in the form of a tiger, it possessed terrifying strength. The moment the Lu Wu leaped into the crowd, the golden lion roared ferociously in an attempt to scare the Lu Wu back or even kill it. However, the Lu Wu merely swayed its 9 tails and lunged forward. In a single round, it bit and snapped the neck of the golden lion, causing blood to gush out. A bloody mist filled the forest. The master of the golden lion, a nascent soul, fled into the distance without even thinking. The many cultivators had already lost their order as they fled in a panicked chaos. However, a forest was not as simple as they thought of it to be. Let alone a primordial forest. It was easy for them to enter, but getting out was far from simple. Pest! Pest! In the forest, a centipede that was more than 10 meters long and as thick as a water bucket slithered forth. It was red all over, moving its thousands of feet with a ferocious gaze. Charging into the crowd, the red centipede sliced the formation into 2 once more. Powerful beasts appeared continuously from the forest, most of them pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Xueqi had no way of fighting and could only flee in the chaos. In such a forest, even nascent souls were useless. They were fleeing all the same at the sight of the pure-blooded ferocious beasts. Xueqi found it hard to imagine what kind of terrifying existence he would encounter if he really entered the primordial ruin. It was too tragic. There were more than 30,000 cultivators who had entered this forest. Now there were a mere few thousands left and the others were doomed to be buried in this forest. If they were down to a few mere thousands just by crossing this forest, how many of them would survive till the end? About 50 kilometers away from the primordial ruin, a huge pitch-black crow flapped its wings and sped over like lightning. A middle-aged man wearing blood robes sat on the crow. That was the Blood Crow King and Blood Crow Palace's lord. Oh! The palace lord frowned gradually and his gaze shimmered after he deployed the tracking secret skill. What's wrong, master? Did that Xueqi hide in Jishui River again? The Blood Crow King asked. No. With a grim expression, the palace lord furrowed his brows and grit his teeth. That lad is about to enter that area. Ah! The Blood Crow King did not understand and froze for a moment. After a brief moment, the Blood Crow King came to a realization as a look of fear flashed in its eyes. It asked in a testing manner, "That area?" "Yes," the Palace Lord nodded. The Blood Crow King analyzed. "That lad has a motive. He's probably trying to lure you there. You must not fall for it, Master." Pausing for a moment, the Blood Crow King continued. "Furthermore, what sort of a place is that? Even nascent souls and void reversions might not be able to escape unscathed. A mere foundation establishment like him is bound to die in that place." "That lad is very scheming," the Palace Lord said with a sullen expression. "This is a plot. Even if I know his intentions, I have to go. Even if he dies, I have to see it with my own eyes. Master, you must be careful. You must not be rash." "It's all right. This is quite a brilliant plot. It's just a pity he missed something." The Palace Lord waved it off and scoffed coldly. "He does not know my identity, nor does he know what lies within that area. As a last resort, even if we alarm the existences there, given my identity, I should be able to escape fully without any problems. Let's go. I want to see where else that Su Zimo can escape to." Chapter 232, Out of the Forest. Chapter 232, Out of the Forest. The primordial forest was filled with a strong and pungent stench of blood. A bloody mist permeated the branches and leaves of the trees, condensing into drops of blood that slid down quietly. Amidst the thorns, gravel and branches, ripped corpses were strewn everywhere. All of them died in miserable states, either torn into two or crushed into meat slime, and were completely unrecognizable. That forest had turned into a living hell. Filled with blood and cruelty, wild beasts roared one after another, causing the ancient trees to shake and the ground to quake. Su Zimo believed that there were people who regretted it the moment hints of an oncoming massacre were shown. However, it was already too late for them to want to back out of the primordial forest. The beasts of the forest had already severed their retreat route completely. The people remaining were getting fewer and fewer. Su Zimo witnessed with his own eyes a nascent soul cultivator walking right at the front, dragged away by a seemingly harmless flower, leaving behind nothing but a momentary tragic cry into silence. In the forest, even the most basic vegetation was left behind from the primordial era and was extremely terrifying. The pressure was intensifying. While Su Zimo was familiar with the rules of survival in a jungle, it was difficult for him to get out alive if even nascent soul cultivators could not promise the same. At that moment, Su Zimo noticed that the gray-robed cultivator had suddenly changed directions. No longer following behind the crowd from Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect, he tunneled to another bush. Su Zimo's heart stirred as he pondered. While Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect had nascent souls leading the way right now and were extremely strong, they were also a greater target for the primordial beasts. It would indeed be safer comparatively if he were to take another path right now. Of course, that was only a relative comparison. Within that forest, there were dangers everywhere and there was nowhere that was absolutely safe. Su Zimo's eyes flickered and he too changed directions, following behind the path of the gray-robed cultivator. Like an anaconda, Su Zimo slithered through the forest and he caught up to the gray-robed cultivator before long, following afar from the back. The gray-robed cultivator's speed wasn't fast and he would even slow down occasionally. Furthermore, the gray-robed cultivator's actions were rather odd. He held a folding fan in his right hand while opening his left palm, and his thumb kept coming into contact with his other fingers from time to time at an extremely fast speed. It was as if he was calculating something. What puzzled Su Zimo the most was that despite the tens of thousands of cultivators who had perished in this forest, the person's face did not show the slightest bit of fear. That sort of mental fortitude was way too terrifying. Right then, the gray-robed cultivator ahead suddenly paused and hid himself. Upon seeing that, Su Zimo did not dare act rashly as well. He pressed himself to the ground and awaited with bated breath. A moment later, a warning flashed in Su Zimo's mind. Right after, a large shadow swept past their heads, covering the skies and emitting a ravening aura as it charged towards the direction of Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect at an extremely fast speed. Su Zimo's face was pale and he broke out in cold sweat. It was true that Su Zimo could sense danger ahead of him in this primordial forest using his spirit perception as well. However, it would be too late by then. Rising, the gray-robed cultivator continued rushing forth. That person has some means. If I follow him, I might be able to get out of this forest. Su Zimo followed closely behind. Sure enough, Su Zimo avoided several attacks from the ferocious beasts by following and pausing according to that person. In Su Zimo's eyes, that gray-robed cultivator suddenly became unfathomable. Before long, the gray-robed cultivator in front turned back suddenly, as if having sensed something. Going low immediately, Su Zimo hid himself. The gray-robed cultivator swept his glance and paused slightly at Su Zimo's hiding spot where he smiled meaningfully before turning front and continuing on. This time round, the gray-robed cultivator's steps were strange as he swept left and right. Suddenly, he burrowed into the forest and disappeared from Su Zimo's line of vision. Su Zimo gave chase right away but realized that he had lost track of the gray-robed cultivator. He realized then that his actions had been exposed. When the gray-robed cultivator sensed it, he chose to shake Su Zimo off. Foo-foo. Su Zimo gave a faint smile and observed his surroundings carefully before choosing a direction to run after. Traveling in a forest as such would definitely leave traces. Others might not be able to see it, but with Su Zimo's experience of living in a forest, he could find the slightest of traces and determine the direction where the gray-robed cultivator had left. Of course, such a method would decrease Su Zimo's speed significantly. A moment later, he looked over and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. The edge of the primordial forest was not far ahead. All of a sudden, Su Zimo's expression changed starkly as he dodged to the side without a second thought. Clang! A deafening sound rang behind him. Turning back, Su Zimo gasped and his entire body went cold. A massive ferocious beast with 8 legs and flames burning on its body stood in front of Su Zimo with a feral expression. An ancient ferocious beast, divine pyrospider. While the divine pyrospider could not spit silk, its 8 claws were sharper than any weapons out there. The divine pyrospider's claw had slammed down earlier like a gigantic saber with thorns on it, leaving a deep ravine in the ground. If Su Zimo had been a half-step slower, he would be split into 2. Given Su Zimo's cultivation realm, he would be burnt to ashes if he touched any bit of flame on the divine pyrospider's body. Su Zimo did not dare to linger any longer and turned to flee. Clang, clang, clang. The divine pyrospider chased closely behind at an extremely fast speed, causing sparks to fly everywhere each time its claws swiped across rocks. Bang! Boom! Boom! Suddenly, a deafening boom echoed from behind Su Zimo. Not far behind him, a pitch-black hole appeared beneath the divine pyrospider out of nowhere. Dark and deep, it was filled with a piercing killing intent. A trace of panic flickered through the divine pyrospider's eyes and it wanted to escape. Boom! Suddenly, a massive pitch-black beard of flesh appeared from that hole, coiling around the divine pyrospider's body like a massive anaconda. Kikiki! A series of ear-piercing screams could be heard from the divine pyrospider as it struggled furiously to no avail. In the blink of an eye, it was yanked down into the cave and disappeared from sight. Su Zimo gulped. He did not even manage to make out what was inside that hole. Swish! Not far away in the forest, a commotion broke out. The sound of the footsteps of ferocious beasts filled with killing intent could be heard. Su Zimo suddenly released his power of blood chi and his body was shrouded with a demonic chi. Releasing divine steed fleeting, he charged in the direction ahead with all his might. Silver-winged cicada, blood-seeking millipede, wind-slicing eagle and many other pure-blooded ferocious beasts were charging over with a murderous intent like devils. Gritting his teeth, Su Zimo had a resolute gaze. 50 feet. 30 feet. 10 feet. Swoosh. Finally, his vision cleared up. Su Zimo had finally gotten out of the primordial forest. When the many ancient ferocious beasts arrived at the edge of the forest, all of them stopped in their tracks in unison with a tacit understanding. With a look of fear in their eyes, they gradually retreated. Chapter 233, Sea of Bones. Chapter 233, Sea of Bones. Tens of thousands of cultivators had entered the forest at the back. However, Zimo believed that less than 1% among them could leave that forest alive. As one of them, Zimo should be happy. However, the sight of the many beasts that were slowly returning to the forest, Zimo suddenly realized that the moment he rushed out of the forest was also the moment he had stepped foot on the land left behind from the Primordial era. The Primordial Ruin. This was the location that was marked highly dangerous on the map. All of those cruel, violent, pure-blooded, ferocious beasts were wary of this Primordial Ruin. What sort of ancient secret was hidden in this place? Turning slowly, Zimo looked over. That single look caused his pupils to contract and even his heart to stop beating. There was an endless amount of white bones. At a glance, there was no end and it filled the entire land. Of those bones, many belonged to humans, but there were many that belonged to remnant ferocious beasts as well. Almost none of them were preserved properly, all shattered and scattered on the ground. This was a true sea of bones. Standing in the face of this sea of bones, Zimo seemed incomparably small. It was as if he would be swallowed whole by the sea of bones the moment he walked in. There was an inexplicable fear, an indescribable suffocation, an endless oppressiveness and a faint scent of blood. Right then, Zimo's chest moved and Night Spirit suddenly burrowed out, leaping down. Looking at the sea of bones in front, Night Spirit's nose twitched. It had a strange expression and its eyes shone with a mysterious glint. All of a sudden, not far away at the edge of the primordial forest, two figures were the first to run out. They were covered in blood and looked terrible. It's them! Zimo swept his glance and recognized their identities. The two of them were nascent souls from Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect. Both of them glanced at the forest behind them with lingering fear. When they turned back and saw the sea of bones, they were also rooted on the spot, unable to contain the shock in their eyes. Even nascent souls felt minuscule in the face of this sea of bones. What sort of a tragic battle could it have been that left such an intimidating ruin? Hurry and escape. It's right up ahead. Hurry, hurry. Help me. A series of cries sounded from the forest nearby. Not long after, another group of cultivators came forth from the forest. More than 100 in numbers, they bore disheveled hairs and tattered clothes as they fell and sat on the ground, panting heavily. There were golden cores and foundation establishment cultivators among them. Of the massive tens of thousands of cultivators' army, including the nascent souls and golden cores, there were only more than 100 who survived. The others had all died in the forest without getting a chance to even catch sight of the primordial ruin. Zimo merely cast a single glance in that direction before turning back. He did not wish to attract the attention of those cultivators. All of a sudden, Night Spirit let out a whimper. Opening its mouth, it bit on Zimo's shirt gently and kept pulling in the direction of the sea of bones. You want to head in? Zimo frowned and asked in a soft voice. Night Spirit nodded. This sea of bones is not simple and we don't know what dangers lurk within. Let's wait for them to scout the area first. There's no hurry, Zimo said. Night Spirit shook its head. Suddenly, it raised a hind leg and peed on Zimo. Of course, Zimo could dodge it with ease. However, a realization struck him. Night Spirit had already gained sentience and was extremely intelligent. It would definitely not try to dirty him for no reason. If it chose to do so, there must be a meaning behind it. What sect are you from? What's your name? Right then, the two nascent souls walked over. They looked at Zimo with superiority, their tone cold and unquestionable. I'm Zimo. I'm not of any sect. Zimo replied indifferently, half in truth. That's perfect. Go take a spin in this sea of bones. If you come back alive, you can take your picking from our Heaven Azura sect or Purple Cloud sect. Both our sects will be willing to take you in, one of the nascent souls said. That's right. The other nascent soul nodded his head. Zimo, this is a huge opportunity for you. Zimo sneered in silence and did not reply. No matter what, he would have to go through the sea of bones. The difference was whether he was going to do it now or later on when his pursuers arrived. By the looks of the situation now, if he did not enter the sea of bones, the two nascent souls beside him would kill him on the spot. Furthermore, Night Spirit was still insistent, looking at Zimo with expectant eyes and urging the latter to head in. At that thought, Zimo no longer hesitated as he strode towards the Sea of Bones. Night Spirit followed beside Zimo's feet like a small black dog. There was a vague hint of excitement in its eyes. The moment Zimo stepped foot into the Sea of Bones, he sensed something unusual. The spirit energy in his dantian seemed to be sealed by an invisible force. Although it had a similar effect to the spirit lock formation, it was even scarier than that. Taking a deep breath, Zimo walked towards the depths of the Sea of Bones. Surrounded by bones, it was eerie and scary, yet unusually quiet. A half-hour later, Zimo had already walked far into the Sea of Bones, but nothing unexpected or untoward happened to him. "Master, let's head in too. If there's really something good, that lad's going to beat us to it," someone from Heaven Azura sect suggested. Yes. The two nascent souls agreed at the same time. With an order, they led the remaining disciples into the Sea of Bones. With their spirit energy locked, even golden cores could not tread through the air and had to walk on the ground. Only nascent souls could fly at a low altitude above the Sea of Bones. The two cultivators had already decided that they would just follow in Zimo's tracks. They wouldn't get too close nor stay too far. If anything were to happen, Zimo would be the first to die and they would have a chance to get away. However, an earth-shattering change happened in the Sea of Bones not long after the two cultivators entered. Zimo looked back. A series of massive waves surged in the Sea of Bones. Seemingly triggered by something, the endless white bones bounced up from the ground and took on various forms through the augmentation of some mysterious power. Some of them formed a gigantic palm of white bones, emerging from the Sea of Bones and grabbing at the crowd fiercely. More than half the cultivators from the two sects perished once more. A blood mist spewed out. Some of the bones turned into ferocious beasts made of bones that bore immense strength, killing anyone they saw with a violent ferocity. Bones started bouncing in the vicinity of Zimo as well. However, the bones seemed to turn a blind eye to Zimo and Night Spirit, and were all rushing to the cultivators of the two sects not far away. Could it be because of Night Spirit's pee? Although Zimo was unwilling to believe it, that seemed to be the only possibility. Bang! A nascent soul fought head-on with a white-boned beast. His expression changed drastically as he stumbled 3 steps back. Right on the heels of that, the nascent soul's body exploded into a bloody pulp, leaving nothing behind. In the face of those bone beasts, even nascent souls could not withstand a single blow. When he saw that, Zimo knew that it was over for Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect. This Sea of Bones was going to be their resting place. Chapter 234, Mysterious Stone Pillar. Chapter 234, Mysterious Stone Pillar. The winds and clouds suddenly changed as the bone wave surged. As if triggered by something, the endless white bones stirred and took on the form of various remnant ferocious beasts. Terrifying existences rose one after another from the Sea of Bones. A murderous aura filled the air as blood rushed into the sky. Zimo could not identify the origin of those remnant ferocious beasts based on their skeletal structure alone. However, there were many humanoid skeletal structures among them that had terrifying combat strength as well. The remaining 100-odd cultivators from Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect, including the nascent souls and golden cores, were slaughtered by the countless white-boned ferocious beasts. Fresh blood splattered and broken limbs were strewn everywhere as tragic cries rang out incessantly. At the sight of that, Zimo felt his scalp go numb while his limbs went cold. Was this the power of a primordial ruin? If these living beings possessed such terrifying combat strength after their deaths, what sort of cultivation realm did they possess while they were alive? Who was it that could have buried them here, forming such a boundless sea of bones? What was in the depths of this sea of bones? In an instant, countless questions flashed through Zimo's mind. At that moment, he truly felt how insignificant he was. Even though he was already a Foundation Establishment cultivator and could achieve sword kinesis flight, he could not shrug off the shackles of being a mere mortal. Zimo walked towards the depths of the Sea of Bones. It was as if he was headed for an extremely unfamiliar era. He was entering a civilization that was buried in the sands of time which no one knew about. The tragic cries behind him faded gradually. None of the cultivators from the two sects were spared from being buried in the sea of bones. The mighty white-boned ferocious beasts scattered and fell to the ground once more. The sea of bones regained its silence. It was so silent that it was frightening. It was as if the killing and slaughter earlier on was nothing but Su Zimo's imagination. A slight gust of breeze blew and Su Zimo felt a chill run down his spine. Unknowingly, he had already broken out in cold sweat. He glanced at Night Spirit beside his feet. He could vaguely guess that Night Spirit had something to do with why the powerful existences in the Sea of Bones did not attack him. As for Night Spirit, it was very alert, sniffing around while leading the way with Su Zimo at the back. In that endless sea of white bones, there was only that man and beast. They were surrounded with extreme desolateness with no signs of life at all. The fog in front of them grew heavier gradually and the visibility was very low. In that thick fog, there was a mixture of moistness and stench of blood. After a long time, Su Zimo found a grayish-white stone pillar standing in the fog in front of him. Extremely thick, it rose from the ground and extended into the skies. In the face of that stone pillar, Su Zimo appeared extremely small. Reaching out, he touched the stone pillar. It was beyond his expectations. This gigantic stone pillar was a relic of the Primordial era, weathered by the elements and washed by the sands of time. Despite that, its surface was smooth as jade without any bit of coarseness. Typically, even supreme-grade spirit weapons would lose their spirituality if they were exposed outside for hundreds of thousands of years, let alone stone pillars. Furthermore, it was at least tens of millions of years from the Primordial era till now. This stone pillar is a treasure. If only I could carry it away. Su Zimo circled a couple of rounds around the stone pillar and thought to himself. Naturally, that was merely a casual thought. Given Su Zimo's strength, he could not even stuff the stone pillar into his storage bag. Even if he could, there was no way he would do so. The Sea of Bones was already so terrifying. Who knew what was the purpose of a mighty stone pillar erected here? What if he were to alert the terrifying existences in the Sea of Bones once more should he move the stone pillar? Circling around the stone pillar once more, Su Zimo did not find any signs from its surface. Weird. Su Zimo's eyes flashed with doubt. He originally thought that there would be some information carved on the stone pillar, perhaps drawings or indications of the Primordial era. However, the surface of the stone pillar was smooth without anything at all. A strong gust of wind blew past the Sea of Bones, causing the fog to dissipate slightly. Looking around, Su Zimo's gaze froze and he exclaimed softly. 1,000 feet away from this stone pillar, there was another stone pillar erected in the same row. Su Zimo walked over and took a look. This stone pillar was almost identical to the first one. It had a smooth as jade surface without any signs on it. As he continued walking along that direction, a similarly thick stone pillar would appear almost once every 1,000 feet. What's going on? Su Zimo pondered for a moment but he had no clue. Under Night Spirit's urging, he continued walking forward. Before long, Su Zimo stopped in his tracks once more. He had already arrived at the end of the Sea of Bones. The end of the Sea of Bones was a tall mountain that towered into the clouds. The top of it was lush, filled with vibrant life and rich vegetation. There was even green water swirling around the foot of the mountain, as though it was a paradise. From the dead and heavy atmosphere of the Sea of Bones to a flourishing mountain peak, Su Zimo could not recover from the sudden change for a moment. Suddenly, a possibility struck him. The Sea of Bones behind him was truly just the boundary of the Sea of Bones. The mountain before him was the true center of the primordial ruin. Or perhaps, even this mountain was not the center of the primordial ruin. Perhaps, the true secret of the ruin awaited those who crossed this mountain. Be it the primordial forest or the Sea of Bones behind him, those were merely barriers protecting the center of the primordial ruin. Here! Here! Night Spirit cried and urged Su Zimo to continue ahead. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, Su Zimo's heart stirred, as if he sensed something. He glanced sideways at a forest at the side. Not far away, a figure appeared from an old tree. Dressed in gray robes, he had a slightly rotund figure with a beardless face, holding a folding fan in his hands. It's you. It's you. Both men exchanged glances and were stunned for a moment before exclaiming. Su Zimo had not expected that he could come across that gray-robed cultivator again at this place. Back in the primordial forest, Su Zimo had already realized that the gray-robed cultivator was far from simple and had some tricks up his sleeves. However, after entering the Sea of Bones, Su Zimo thought that the person would perish within. He never expected that the person would arrive at the mountain before him. While Su Zimo was shocked, the gray-robed cultivator was even more shocked. Given his eyesight, he could naturally tell that Su Zimo was only a Foundation establishment cultivator. There was no possibility of him hiding his cultivation realm. Right from the get-go, the gray-robed cultivator knew that the tens of thousands of cultivators that coveted to step foot into the primordial ruin would all die. Apart from him, no one else could survive. He had not expected that this seemingly normal green-robed cultivator would actually be able to cross the Sea of Bones. He could understand how the green-robed cultivator was able to pass through the primordial forest. After all, this person was smart and had followed behind him in the forest. However, he had already dumped this person right at the very end. Interesting. Walking slowly towards Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator let out a malicious smile. Chapter 235. Demon Suppressing Rope. Chapter 235. Demon Suppressing Rope. Narrowing his gaze, Su Zimo let out a wary look. Even though the gray-robed cultivator before him was only at early-stage Foundation establishment, Su Zimo did not dare to be careless. The person reeked of a strange and unfathomable aura from head to toe. Furthermore, the fact that this man was able to cross the primordial forest and Sea of Bones with ease was reason enough for Su Zimo to be wary. Arriving around 10 meters in front of Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator stopped in his tracks all of a sudden. Raising his brows, he asked with a fake smile, "Fellow Taoist, you're really following tightly. I didn't manage to shake you off at all?" Su Zimo looked at the person calmly and remained silent. A hint of mockery flashed in the gray-robed cultivator's eyes and his expression darkened. His smile was suddenly wiped away as he asked in a cold tone, "Tell me, what's your background? Why are you following me?" Having said that, the gray-robed cultivator stared fixedly at Su Zimo's face, hoping to find a clue in his expression and gaze. "I'm not following you." Su Zimo shook his head expressionlessly. That was the truth. Failing to gain anything, the gray-robed cultivator frowned and thought internally, could it really be a coincidence? No. The gray-robed cultivator changed his mind. Even if it's a coincidence, I can't let him continue forth. If my plans were to be spoiled because of this person, the losses would be immense. How did you manage to cross the Sea of Bones? The gray-robed cultivator asked all of a sudden. Walking. When he heard that, the corner of the gray-robed cultivator's mouth twitched. He wanted to say something but stopped. Sweeping his gaze across Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator looked at Night Spirit who was beside Su Zimo's feet. Upon seeing Night Spirit, the gray-robed cultivator could not help but roll his eyes. He mocked, "Fellow Taoist, your preferences are truly extraordinary. Most people would look for the cubs of ancient remnant beasts or pure-blooded ferocious beasts to be their fighting beasts. But look at you, rearing the cub of a black dog. None of your business." Su Zimo sneered and retorted. The gray-robed cultivator did not get angry either, merely waving the folding fan in his hand and saying with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, let me give you a piece of advice. Since you're able to cross the Sea of Bones, I advise you to turn back and stop continuing forward. This is not a place for you to be." The gray-robed cultivator pointed at the mountain by the side and said with a serious expression, emphasizing every single word. Su Zimo did not say anything. He wanted to head back as well. To be precise, Su Zimo had never intended to step into this place right from the get-go. He was only here because he had nowhere else to go. If he were to head back now, he would only be met with his pursuers. Furthermore, he managed to arrive here by relying on Night Spirit's guidance and persistence. It was not that easy for Su Zimo to retreat. "You're not retreating." The gray-robed cultivator frowned and muttered, "That's troublesome. I can't let you follow me and spoil my plans. You can head your way and I'll head mine. We won't have to interfere with one another. Xueqi was also wary towards the grey-robed cultivator, and did not want to have a clash with the latter. After a brief silence, the grey-robed cultivator shook his head. No, that's too risky. Since you refuse to leave, you can't blame me. Oh. Upon hearing that, Xueqi's expression changed. Without thinking, he immediately attacked first. The two of them were extremely close. If nothing unexpected happened, Xueqi was 70% confident that he would be able to take down the grey-robed cultivator. Boom! With the plow heaven's stride, a clear footprint appeared on the ground, causing the surrounding soil to fly everywhere. In almost an instant, Xueqi appeared in front of the grey-robed cultivator and channeled his bloodline, causing the sound of tsunamis and rumbling thunder to echo from his body in a terrifying manner. Faced with Xueqi's attack, the grey-robed cultivator did not panic at all when he heard the sounds coming from Xueqi's body. Instead, he exclaimed softly and his eyes filled with curiosity. Such mighty power of bloodline. How did you manage to cultivate it? Without saying a word, Xueqi swung his arm and punched the top of the grey-robed cultivator's head. It was like a huge seal that suddenly fell. Not bad, not bad. Against Xueqi's attack, the grey-robed cultivator did not avoid nor dodge and was even in the mood to nod and praise him. Suddenly, the grey-robed cultivator stretched out his folding fan and tapped Xueqi on the wrist lightly. That tap was done extremely swiftly, landing with absolute precision. Even the timing was perfect as well. Bang! Xueqi's wrist went numb and the power of that punch dissipated entirely. Right after, a piercing pain surged from Xueqi's wrist, as if it was snapped. The grey-robed cultivator chuckled. Out of nowhere, he produced a rope and tossed it in Xueqi's direction gently while muttering, "Restrict." That rope coiled around Xueqi's body immediately, tying his arms and legs to both sides of his body while circling round after round. In the blink of an eye, Xueqi was completely restricted by that unassuming rope and could not move at all. A black shadow fluttered out. "Night Spirit, don't move." Xueqi called back Night Spirit immediately. In reality, the moment the grey-robed cultivator attacked, Xueqi had already realized that this person was definitely not at early-stage foundation establishment. It could be a golden core or even a nascent soul. At the very least, the cultivation realm of the grey-robed cultivator was far superior to his. Against such a powerful cultivator, it would be useless even if Night Spirit were to charge at him. Instead, it might even be killed by the grey-robed cultivator. Stopping in its tracks, Night Spirit glared at the grey-robed cultivator coldly. It raised its head and a deep growl came from the depths of its throat, filled with killing intent. Heh! The grey-robed cultivator walked before Night Spirit and squatted, saying with a smile, "You've sure got some guts, black dog cub. How dare you attack me?" The proximity between the man and beast was extremely close. Night Spirit could reach him just by raising its paw. However, Night Spirit did not make a move still after a while, merely looking at him with a cold gaze. Smiling, the grey-robed cultivator tapped Night Spirit on the head with his folding fan. "Not bad. You're quite clever. How lucky of you." Xueqi exhaled deeply. Naturally, he could tell that the grey-robed cultivator was deliberately luring Night Spirit to attack earlier on. If Night Spirit had truly attacked, not only would it fail to injure the grey-robed cultivator, the latter would even take the opportunity to kill it. The grey-robed cultivator stood up and looked at Xueqi with a helpless expression. He spread out his hands and said, "Since you're unwilling to leave, I can only hold you here. By the way, this is the demon-suppressing rope. Oh, I don't think you've heard of it." The grey-robed cultivator continued, "Even pure-blooded ferocious beasts would be tied up tightly by the demon-suppressing rope. Although your body is strong, it's not comparable to pure-blooded ferocious beasts. So, don't bother lest you bring about suffering for yourself." Xueqi did not reply. The grey-robed cultivator turned over and took a few steps. Seemingly worried, he said, "Stay here obediently. I'll be back in a little while and help you undo the demon-suppressing rope." With that said, the grey-robed cultivator tunneled into the forest with swift steps. Heading towards the peak, he disappeared before long. Chapter 236, Escape. Chapter 236, Escape. Two figures stumbled out of the primordial forest and descended before the Sea of Bones. "Thank you for saving me, Master," the Blood Crow King said with lingering fear. If not for the Blood Crow Palace's lord, given its own strength, it would not have been able to make it out of the primordial forest. The palace lord nodded and turned back to look at the remnant ferocious beasts that were gradually retreating in the forest before heaving a sigh of relief. Even with his strength as a void reversion, he had to exercise caution while crossing that primordial forest. If he had truly encountered the king of the forest, even he would have to retreat to protect himself. "Master, are we still chasing? That lad's only a Foundation establishment cultivator. Could he have truly made it out of that primordial forest?" The Blood Crow King's tone was clearly filled with doubt. Surveying his surroundings, the palace lord noticed some traces left behind by Heaven Azura sect and Purple Cloud sect. He nodded his head. "Yes, that lad is quite lucky. He must have joined the crowd and managed to get out by chance." Narrowing his gaze, the palace lord looked at the Sea of Bones before him in silence. There was a deep shock in the depths of the Blood Crow King's eyes. There were so many white bones piled into a sea. Furthermore, these bones left behind from the primordial era had yet to decompose till this day. Just how strong were the owners of these bones back then? "Master, are we crossing this Sea of Bones?" the Blood Crow King asked at the side warily. Since there was no trace of Su Zimo in this place, logically, it should mean that Su Zimo entered the Sea of Bones. However, for some reason, the Blood Crow King felt a sense of trepidation when he faced the Sea of Bones. The palace lord nodded. "I'll locate that lad using the secret skill. Blood Curse Attraction." The palace lord shouted softly and a dark glow emanated from his eyes. Like ink, the glow started to spread out before condensing into the word character 4 green in midair, emitting strange energy ripples. "Oh!" the palace lord exclaimed softly as the character dissipated. The Blood Crow King asked, "What's wrong, Master?" Frowning, the palace lord shook his head. "It doesn't make sense. That lad's location shows that he's already crossed the Sea of Bones. How did he manage to do it as a Foundation establishment cultivator? Could there be more to the background of that lad than it seems?" The palace lord's gaze flickered as he fell into deep thought. "Wait here. I'll go take a look myself," the palace lord said to the Blood Crow King before walking to the edge of the Sea of Bones and chanting a mysterious incantation. Right after, the palace lord bit his tongue gently and spat out a drop of blood essence. That blood essence, under the augmentation of the incantation, formed a blood-colored barrier that enveloped the surroundings of the palace lord. The palace lord stepped foot into the Sea of Bones. He was a few steps in when the Sea of Bones surged with bone waves, seemingly sensing something. Countless white bones surged from the ground, taking on the form of white-boned ferocious beasts. Terrifying and menacing mysterious flames danced in the sockets of their skulls. Roar! Waves of roars sounded from the Sea of Bones as the winds and clouds churned. The Blood Crow King's legs turned jelly as it witnessed the scene from the edge of the Sea of Bones. Given his cultivation, it could naturally sense the frightening aura that was being emitted from those white-boned ferocious beasts. Any one of those white-boned ferocious beasts would be able to crush him into pieces with ease. Surrounded by the many white-boned ferocious beasts, the palace lord continued forward with a calm expression. The white-boned ferocious beasts stared at the palace lord and identified the blood mist surrounding the latter. After hesitating for a long time, they dispersed and fell back into the Sea of Bones, turning everything calm once more. At the moment when the palace lord released his secret skill to investigate Su Zimo's whereabouts. At the end of the Sea of Bones, at the foot of a godly mountain, Su Zimo's eyes turned a faint green hue as he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his mind. Right after, Su Zimo's vision blurred and once more, he saw the blood-robed youth who had died in his hands charging at him with a sinister smile. That throbbing pain and hallucination disappeared in an instant. Before long, a commotion stirred from the Sea of Bones behind him, as if someone had barged in. "They're actually chasing me here." Su Zimo's expression turned extremely terrible. He originally thought that the primordial forest alone was enough to discourage his pursuers from continuing. But from the looks of it, the other party still decided to enter the Sea of Bones. There were only two possibilities now. If the other party could cross the Sea of Bones, he would definitely die. The second scenario was that the white-boned ferocious beasts in the Sea of Bones would kill off all of his pursuers. Su Zimo did not dare to take the gamble. Looking at the rope that was tying him up, Su Zimo tried to budge but realized that it did not show signs of loosening. Sneering internally, Su Zimo released his blood chi explosively. Bang! Boom! Boom! His bloodline churned within his body, letting out a rich demonic chi as blood filled his flesh while his tendons shook. Su Zimo's body was expanding. Buzz! The demon-suppressing rope shone brightly, forming a resplendent atmosphere, before suppressing Su Zimo's blood chi instantly. Ugh! Su Zimo's expression changed as he grunted. The demon-suppressing rope did not loosen. Instead, it dug deeper into Su Zimo's flesh such that blood oozed out, staining his green robes. Instantly, Su Zimo calmed his blood chi and allowed his body to return to normal. The wounds that were inflicted on his body by the demon-suppressing rope were nothing but superficial wounds. With Su Zimo's immense healing powers, he would be able to recover very quickly. However, how he should escape remained a tricky problem. Su Zimo could not just wait foolishly for the gray-robed cultivator to return and undo the demon-suppressing rope for him. He would probably be a dead man by then. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Since he was unable to break free from it directly, how about attempting tendons transformation? A series of crackling sounds could be heard from Su Zimo's body as his tendons and bones echoed at the same time. Su Zimo's figure shrank rapidly at a discernible pace. In the blink of an eye, he had shrunk to a mere meter tall and was extremely short. However, to Su Zimo's shock, the demon-suppressing rope had changed along with him. It kept shrinking while remaining tightly wrapped around his body such that he couldn't escape. This was the reason why the demon-suppressing rope was so powerful. After demon beasts managed to cultivate an inner core, they could alter their appearances and take on a human form, no matter what sort of massive beasts they originally were. However, if they were bound by the demon-suppressing rope, they would not be able to escape no matter the sort of transformations they undertook. Su Zimo was at his wit's end. Right then, Night Spirit came over and extended its sharp claws that flashed with a cold glint. It hooked onto the rope and tore it apart continuously. Moments later, the demon-suppressing rope snapped. The moment it snapped, the light on the demon-suppressing rope dimmed and it fell from Su Zimo's body. Su Zimo was elated. Hiya! With an urging cry, Night Spirit turned around and sprinted up the mountain. Su Zimo followed hurriedly. Chapter 237. Extinct Primordial Life Form. Chapter 237. Extinct Primordial Life Form. The gray-robed cultivator tiptoed his way through the mountain, looking nervous and furtive. He held his folding fan in one hand and a metal rod as thick as a finger in his other. At the tip of the metal rod, a slender needle passed through it, constantly spinning and guiding his direction. Once in a while, the gray-robed cultivator would stop in his tracks and wait for the needle to stabilize in a certain direction before heading in that direction. With the constant pauses, the gray-robed cultivator's speed was not fast. This old man's earth spirit ruler is not reliable at all. Spinning here and there, it's not even giving me a fixed direction. The gray-robed cultivator mumbled as he walked. On the other side, Night Spirit brought Su Zimo through the forest of the godly mountain at an extremely fast speed. Its nose twitched as it sprinted, as if smelling for something, as it walked further and further into the godly mountain. After a long time, Night Spirit came before a gigantic cave and stopped. Su Zimo raised his head and looked at the cave in shock. His mouth was slightly agape and he was speechless for a moment. The size of the cave was way beyond his imagination. In front of the cave entrance, Su Zimo was like an ant before a majestic palace hall. He felt incomparably small. Just who was it who could have opened up such a massive cave in this godly mountain? There were no signs of any saber or axe marks at the boundaries of the cave. Such a method could be considered as a work of God. What sort of a purpose did this cave hold with its size? Night Spirit bit the hem of Su Zimo's shirt and continued to tug at him, gesturing for him to enter the cave quickly. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo could not help but turn and look back before entering the cave. That single look caused Zimo to stare fixedly, unable to shift his gaze away. The massive cave was halfway up the mountain. Zimo had the high ground vantage from where he was, and he naturally had a wider view of the sea of bones behind him. He could vaguely see that there were 2 rows of stone pillars in the sea of bones, and they were nearly as tall as half the mountain's height. The top of the 2 rows of stone pillars leaned towards the middle, embedding into a huge, thick beam that was full of spikes and was several times thicker than the stone pillars. What exactly is this thing? There was a flash of doubt in Zimo's eyes. He had a nagging feeling that the stone pillars and beam resembled something when combined. After pondering for a while, Zimo had no clue and followed Night's spirit into the cave. At the same time, the Blood Crow Palace's lord crossed the sea of bones safely and let out a heave of relief. The palace lord was motionless as he focused his senses and could not help but sneer. Still fleeing. I want to see where you can flee to. Following the guidance of the blood curse, the palace lord rushed up the godly mountain. Before long, a figure with grey robes appeared in front of a huge cave on the middle of the mountain, wielding a folding fan in one hand and the earth spirit ruler on another. The old man did not lie. Even though the earth spirit ruler's a little slow, it didn't get it wrong. I really found it. Looking at the gigantic cave before him, the grey-robed cultivator could but help but chuckle with a smug expression. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, there's no need to force things. Shaking his head, the grey-robed cultivator waved his folding fan and sang softly in delight as he entered the cave. Zimo had long realized that ever since they stepped foot into this primordial ruin, Night's spirit had been different from usual. It was a little excited and nervous at the same time. This was the first time complex emotions as such appeared on Night's spirit. Back when Tao Lord Extreme Fire perished, he did not make it clear whether Night's spirit came from a primordial or ancient ruin. Zimo had the suspicion that Night's spirit might have some intricate connection with this primordial ruin. A bolder assumption would be to guess that Night's spirit originated from this primordial ruin. After all, Night's spirit's behavior had been peculiar along the entire journey. The cave was extremely empty and there was almost no obstruction. Rushing for a long time, the man and beast finally arrived at the deepest part of the cave. This is... At the end of the cave stood a grayish-white oval object that was as tall as a person. Zimo stared in disbelief as he muttered to himself, "That's an egg? What sort of a demon beast would lay such a massive egg?" Zimo came before the gigantic egg and reached out to touch and feel it. There were no patterns on the egg, which meant that it had not been born for long, a month at best. In that case, the phenomenon that the many cultivators witnessed a month ago should have been caused by the birth of this demon beast egg. Zimo recalled all the information he had regarding demon beast eggs. After a moment, he still could not recall anything about the sort of demon beasts that could possibly give birth to this frighteningly massive egg. Night Spirit navigated through Zimo's robes and arrived at his chest area before long, watching him with blinking eyes, seemingly showing off. Gazing at the egg before him, Zimo frowned and pondered. He had the feeling that if he were to connect the scattered pieces of information along the entire journey, he should be able to obtain an answer. The stone pillars, the beam, the cave, the egg. A flash of light flickered through Zimo's mind. At the thought of that possibility, Zimo's expression changed starkly. Back when he first saw the gray stone pillars in the Sea of Bones, Zimo was puzzled. Why would there be so many stone pillars in the Sea of Bones? Furthermore, the surface of those stone pillars were smooth as jade. Why wasn't there any trace of aging despite the gap between the primordial era and present times? What sort of stone could be so resolute? It was till this very moment that Zimo finally understood. Those were not stone pillars at all. Those were bones. It was the skeleton of an incomparably strong being in the past. The 2 rows of stone pillars were in reality the ribs of this powerful life form. As for the even thicker beam in the middle that was filled with spikes, that was the spine of the life form. The reason why it was in the Sea of Bones was because they were bones to begin with. This cave that he was in right now should have been opened up by the race of that terrifying life form. Just what sort of a being was it that could have possessed such a frighteningly massive body? Even after dying for so many years with its flesh decomposed, the bones were still smooth as jade and were immortal. What sort of cultivation realm did this life form possess in the past? A primordial life form. To think that primordial life forms which were already extinct in Tianhuang mainland were buried here. If there were no surprises, the gigantic egg before him should have been laid by that massive primordial life form. At that thought, Su Zimo gulped. Piak! Suddenly, a crisp sound reverberated in the cave behind him. Su Zimo's pupils constricted instantly. Sprawled against his chest, Night Spirit had actually reached out with its claws and pierced the huge egg in front of them. Chapter 238. Big Trouble. Chapter 238. Big Trouble. Night Spirit, you. Su Zimo was speechless. Even though Night Spirit had not been born for long, it was extremely intelligent and sharp. Whether it was the stunning display of killing a golden core spirit demon back in Dongling Valley or its various actions upon entering the primordial ruin, it was clear that Night Spirit was extraordinary. But this time, Su Zimo realized that Night Spirit had gotten into trouble. Furthermore, it was a trouble that could get them killed. The egg in front of them had clearly just been born. This also meant that the unknown primordial life form that laid this egg could possibly be nearby. Even though he had not witnessed the terror of that primordial life form personally, he could understand everything through the forest and sea of bones outside. A single finger of that terrifying life form should be enough to crush them into a pulp. Hia! Night Spirit cried out softly, as if it wanted Su Zimo to hug it. Su Zimo's mind was in a mess as he carried Night Spirit by instinct. Stretching its neck, Night Spirit only relented its claws when it got closer to the gigantic egg. A tiny hole appeared on the surface of the egg, leaking out with a golden juice that was shining with a bedazzling, crystalline glow. Instantly, Night Spirit opened its mouth and sucked at the hole. Gulp! Gulp! Night Spirit swallowed heavily. It's eating. Su Zimo watched everything in disbelief with widened eyes. Instinctively, he wanted to yank Night Spirit away. However, on second thought, even if he were to carry Night Spirit away right now, they've already caused the trouble. It was clear that the egg was not going to survive. Furthermore, ever since Night Spirit was born, despite Su Zimo, Monkey, Spirit Tiger and Little Crane's immense efforts to prepare various sources of food for it, it was mostly disinterested. Night Spirit did not touch the flesh of wild beasts, ordinary spirit beasts and spirit demons at all. It would only have a slight taste when it came to the flesh of ancient remnant beasts. During this period of time, Night Spirit's body had barely grown as well. It merely gained a little bit of weight with some coarseness to its skin where faint patterns had started to appear. It was rare to see Night Spirit so fond of this egg juice. It had an intoxicated expression as it devoured with a slight hint of greediness. Su Zimo's heart softened as he lamented to himself, "Forget it. Let it have its fill then." The egg juice entered Night Spirit's stomach continuously and the eggshell became a little transparent. It was clear to tell the speed in which Night Spirit was devouring the egg juice. Under Su Zimo's gaze, Night Spirit consumed a full half of the egg juice before coming to a stop. The demon beast egg was as tall as a person. And how old was Night Spirit? If he had not witnessed it personally, Su Zimo would not have been able to imagine how Night Spirit could have taken in that much egg juice with its tiny little body. Night Spirit's belly was rotund and was almost like an airbag. A gentle shake could echo with the sound of water flowing within. It looked at the egg in front of it, still unsatisfied. Sticking out its tongue, its eye lit up and it licked its lips. "Aren't you afraid of dying from overeating?" Su Zimo shook his head and chided in laughter. However, it made sense. Such an opportunity might never happen again. It was no wonder why Night Spirit was so greedy. "Since you're done eating, let's quickly retreat and see if we can escape." Su Zimo had a feeling that the shattering of that egg might have already alarmed the frightening existence in the primordial ruin. "Hia!" Night Spirit called out. The moment it opened its mouth, it spat out a cluster of shiny and bedazzling rays. In that glow, there was an extremely rich and pure life essence. Su Zimo's body shuddered as his flesh was being nourished by that glow. He could sense the various magical changes that were happening within his body. Shutting its mouth, Night Spirit gestured and pointed to the demon beast egg in front of it. "You want me to eat the rest?" Su Zimo understood what Night Spirit meant and was shocked. It nodded immediately, indicating that the egg juice was the most delicious thing ever, and urged Su Zimo to consume it quickly. Su Zimo was a little hesitant. Night Spirit started gesturing once more, telling him that it could no longer eat anymore and that it would be a waste to leave the remaining egg juice here. Gritting his teeth, Su Zimo's heart hardened. Since they were already in big trouble, what was he still worrying about? Placing Night Spirit into his robes, Su Zimo walked up and lifted the gigantic demon beast egg with both hands before gulping down in mouthfuls from that small little hole. The taste is a little strong, not entirely delicious. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. The refreshing and smooth juice flowed down his throat into his stomach. Boom! In that instant, Su Zimo felt like his body was about to explode. The energy contained in that juice was much more than Su Zimo had imagined. The moment it entered his stomach, the energy burst out into streams of divine lights that ran wildly in Su Zimo's body, flowing through all limbs. It was nourishing his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow and 5 organs. At that moment, Su Zimo realized that the juice in that egg was a great tonic for him. It was even better than any demon beast inner cores or whatnot. If he could digest all the energy of that juice, he might even be able to attain greater mastery of the organ's refinement section. Opportunity. This was an unimaginable opportunity for him. Of course, the prerequisite was for him to be able to escape that place. Su Zimo swallowed heavily. He finally understood the feeling of why Night Spirit was still longing for it even after it finished eating. There was probably nothing in this world that could be purer than the energy of that juice. That power was way too strong. It barged wildly through Su Zimo's body, spilling with brilliant rays of light through his pores. A bedazzling light surrounded Su Zimo and shrouded all around. In that luminescence, he vaguely resembled a god. Su Zimo knew that the energy contained by that juice was extremely rare. With a deep breath, he quickly closed his pores shut to seal the essence chi within his body. However, the energy was way too massive and thick. It was difficult to contain everything in a short while given Su Zimo's physique. His eyes, nostrils, ears and mouth began to emit rays of light, surging with vitality in a frightening manner. Under the rush of that power, a faint, green glint appeared in Su Zimo's eyes. Before long, the evil power that was hidden in Su Zimo's eyes was purged by the pure power of the egg juice. That evil power was none other than the one left behind in Su Zimo's body by the blood-robed youth's blood slave art. 2 green droplets of water trickled from the corner of Su Zimo's eyes down onto the ground, condensed without dissipating and emitting a ghastly light. Su Zimo was elated. He never expected that he would be able to get rid of the latent danger within his body after consuming the egg juice. This meant that as long as Su Zimo escaped from this place, his pursuers could no longer track him using any secret skills. Chapter 239, Unforeseen Situation. Chapter 239, Unforeseen Situation. Before long, Su Zimo drank all the juice from the demon beast egg. He did not wish to waste the essence energy in his body and immediately worked to close his pores, eyes, ears, nostrils and mouth. The warm current surged through his entire body and it felt like exploding. Body tempering, tendons transformation, bone strengthening, marrow cleansing, organs refinement. The 5 sections of sutras reverberated in Su Zimo's mind. He tried his best to suppress that energy. After a short while, the energy was evidently calmer and was no longer colliding rampantly within his body. Even then, Su Zimo did not dare to unlock his pores, eyes, ears, nostrils and mouth. All of a sudden, Su Zimo's heart stirred. He could vaguely sense that someone was speeding towards his direction with their robes rustling loudly. His expression changed slightly and he quickly turned back. After entering the cave, the gray-robed cultivator put away the earth spirit ruler. Even though the cave was massive and did not seem like it was made by humans, the interior was not complex. He would definitely reach the deepest part of the cave if he walked along it. After a while, the gray-robed cultivator suddenly stopped in his tracks and frowned. Strange. Why does it feel like something is off? The gray-robed cultivator murmured before continuing forward, opening one of his palms and starting to divine by using his thumb to make contact with the other 4 fingers. Oh! A moment later, The gray-robed cultivator's expression changed starkly as he gasped. Unforeseen circumstances? How did this happen? He grit his teeth and hastened in speed, rushing towards the depth of the cave. Could someone have arrived before me and spoiled my plans? Who could it be? That's impossible. There were only 2 of us who managed to cross the primordial forest and sea of bones. Furthermore, I restrained that green-robed cultivator using my demon-suppressing rope, and there's no way he could have broken free from it. What went wrong? The gray-robed cultivator's mind was in a mess as countless thoughts filled his mind. Turning around a corner, his vision cleared up. A gigantic egg entered his view. The gray-robed cultivator finally calmed down. Heaving a sigh of relief, he thought to himself, thank goodness, I'm not too late. The egg is still here. However, the gray-robed cultivator found himself worked up at the next moment. There was a green-robed cultivator beside that gigantic egg. The green-robed cultivator seemed to have heard his footsteps and turned around suddenly. That person's robes around the chest was undone and there was a little dog head popping out from it. The man and beast were pursing their lips tightly with a strange expression, as if they were holding their breaths. It's you guys. The gray-robed cultivator was stunned for a moment, slightly dazed. He could not understand why the person that he had restrained at the foot of the mountain with the demon-suppressing rope had arrived before him. It's him? Su Zimo was also stunned for a moment. Instantly, Su Zimo realized that the goal of that gray-robed cultivator was the demon beast egg beside him. A little guilty, Su Zimo could not help but avert the gaze of the gray-robed cultivator. Because the gray-robed cultivator's mind was entirely focused on the demon beast egg, he did not notice Su Zimo's abnormality. He walked forth and said at the same time, fellow Taoist, I'm not going to bother about how you managed to break free from the demon-suppressing rope. However, that egg is mine. But of course, given your cultivation, you're not going to be my match if you insist on fighting me for the egg. The gray-robed cultivator was filled with confidence as he glanced askew at Su Zimo. Su Zimo did not say anything. He did not even dare to breathe. Right now, as long as Su Zimo were to open his mouth and speak, beautiful lights would definitely burst forth from his mouth in a bedazzling manner. At that moment, the gray-robed cultivator had already arrived in front of the demon beast egg. He swept his gaze across the surface and frowned, muttering softly, "Why is there a white spot that's glowing?" The voice stopped abruptly. The gray-robed cultivator could no longer continue. He stared straight at that tiny hole on the demon beast egg. With a livid expression, the corners of his mouth twitched as if he was at the brink of collapse. Pooh! Night Spirit was simply way too young and could not hold it in anymore as it opened its mouth and shouted. A massive aura of essence appeared for a brief moment. Oh! Seemingly sensing something, the gray-robed cultivator spun around. Su Zimo saw that they could no longer hide it and no longer held back, opening his mouth and exhaling deeply. Right after, brilliant light spilled from Su Zimo's mouth and nose, forming a dazzling atmosphere. Fuck dash. There was no way the gray-robed cultivator did not know what happened upon seeing that. Instantly, he was fuming and his mouth swelled from anger, nearly puking out blood. There was no way Su Zimo would dare to linger any longer as he deployed Divine Steed Fleeting and sped out of the cave immediately. Fuck, you're still trying to escape. The gray-robed cultivator bellowed with reddened eyes. Waving his arm, the sleeves of his robes expanded as he circled around Su Zimo a couple of times before yanking the latter back. Hey, what are you doing? Su Zimo's voice was questioning despite his situation. Unexpectedly, the moment he opened his mouth, a ray of light sprayed on the gray-robed cultivator's face. Fuck dash. The gray-robed cultivator was trembling from anger as he grabbed Su Zimo's collar and said through gritted teeth, "You actually ate the egg. You fucking actually ate the egg. That's a waste of that treasure. Do you know what sort of a life form that egg contains, kid?" When he saw the frenzied appearance of the man, Su Zimo was afraid that he might lose his mind and replied honestly, "I don't know." "You ate it without knowing it?" The gray-robed cultivator let loose of Su Zimo and wailed as if his parents had passed away. "I went through so much hardship to come all the way here just for this egg. But, you bloody ate it up. Damn it." At that moment, the gray-robed cultivator even had suicidal thoughts. This Foundation establishment cultivator who had appeared out of nowhere had screwed him to death. If the old man were to know about this, he would probably be mocked to death. Kid, just wait to die. To think that you would dare eat that egg, fu-fu-fu. Looking at Su Zimo, the gray-robed cultivator sneered. Su Zimo did not reply. The more the gray-robed cultivator thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. He moved forward and clenched his teeth. How much of it did you eat? You're even spewing out light from your mouth. How did you manage to eat everything alone? Burp. Right then, Night Spirit, who was initially hidden in Su Zimo's robes, popped its head out and burped. There were also a few shining rays of light that spewed from its nose and mouth. Fuck dash. The gray-robed cultivator rolled his eyes and felt dizzy, almost fainting. Even that dog ate so much of it. Why you? He pointed at Su Zimo's face and was so pissed that he was speechless. All of a sudden, the gray-robed cultivator seemed to have thought of something and ran to the egg hurriedly. He flipped the folding fan in his hand and smashed it into pieces. There was not much juice left in the egg. Only some were still stuck on the eggshells. I don't care anymore. I'm going to try some too. The gray-robed cultivator muttered to himself and could not be bothered any longer. Raising a piece of eggshell with both hands, he stuck out his tongue and licked it without any regard for his image. Chapter 240, Earth-Shattering. Chapter 240, Earth-Shattering. Under the guidance of the Blood Curse's power, the Blood Crow Palace's lord arrived at a cave in the middle of the godly mountain. This cave. Raising his head, he looked at the massive entrance and a hint of fear and hesitation flashed through the depths of his eyes. Could that lad have really ran inside? Frowning, the palace lord's eyes flickered and he was momentarily at a loss. Given his identity, forcefully crossing the primordial forest and sea of bones might not anger the terrifying beings of this place. At most, he would just reveal his identity. However, stepping foot into this cave would definitely lead to fatal trouble. Right as the palace lord was hesitating, an extremely terrifying aura and a lethal killing intent suddenly came from behind the godly mountain. When he sensed that aura, the palace lord's expression froze. The depths of the cave. The gray-robed cultivator licked every single piece of eggshell thrice. The eggshells were so clean that they could reflect figures and could be used as mirrors. Su Zimo was dumbstruck. He lowered his head and looked at Night Spirit, thinking to himself, even if Night Spirit were to lick it, it probably wouldn't be able to lick this cleanly. This person's zodiac sign must be a dog. There was no way Su Zimo could have known that just the egg juice stuck on the shell alone was enough to have the gray-robed cultivator go crazy. The energy was extremely pure and rich without a single bit of impurities. If it was completely absorbed by the body, the changes to one's physique was obvious. Grinding his teeth, the gray-robed cultivator glared at Su Zimo and Night Spirit at the side begrudgingly. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. That man and beast had eaten so much that their bodies could not take it in completely, such that they spewed out light the moment they opened their mouths. What a waste. It was one thing for someone else to eat the juice, but a dog. At the side, Su Zimo frowned as the uneasiness in his heart intensified. He had long wanted to leave this place, but the gray-robed cultivator had no intention of letting him do so. Out of helplessness, Su Zimo could only stand there and wait while watching the gray-robed cultivator lick the eggshells in a frenzied manner. Seeing that the gray-robed cultivator was about to lick them once more, Su Zimo could not help but probe, "Fellow Taoist, why don't you bring those eggshells with you so that you can continue licking when you get back?" The gray-robed cultivator paused in his actions and his mouth cramped while fire burned in his eyes. Eggshell? Why the fuck am I left with just the eggshells? It's all because of you and that black dog of yours. Before the gray-robed cultivator could get angry, Su Zimo reminded him, "I truly did not know what the life form in that egg was, but what I know is that if we don't leave right now, we're definitely going to be dead." Pouting his lips, the gray-robed cultivator licked his lips, unsatisfied. He glanced askew at Su Zimo with disdain and waved off his hand casually. "Let's correct that statement. You're the one that's definitely going to be dead. Not me." Su Zimo frowned. Seemingly thought of something else, the gray-robed cultivator continued, "Right, I've got to correct that even further. Even if you were to escape now, It's too late. By eating that egg, you've already alarmed the life form in this place. Even if you can fly into the heavens or burrow into hell, you will still die. Don't forget, you ate it too. Su Zimo pointed to the eggshell in the hands of the gray-robed cultivator and sneered. I don't believe that the life form here will spare your life. Foo-foo. Chuckling, the gray-robed cultivator shook his head. You don't have to worry about that. I naturally have my own means of leaving this place. You can just wait here for death obediently. When he heard that, Su Zimo's mind went rampant even though he looked indifferent on the surface. Swoosh. Right then, an extremely terrifying aura descended and enveloped the surroundings of that entire godly mountain, surging in from outside the cave. Roar, roar, roar. Right after, a loud and clear roar rolled from the sky behind the godly mountain. It was extremely fast and came close almost in an instant. Su Zimo had lived in Songlang mountain range for an entire year and had seen countless demon beasts. However, he had never heard a roar as such. It was reverberating and its magnitude swept through the 9 heavens in all directions. A boundless power and anger was contained within that roar. Bang! Boom! Boom! The entire godly mountain began to shake as cracks appeared in the cave, causing countless rocks to roll down into dust clouds. This was what Earth-Shattering truly meant. A mere roar could cause the godly mountain to crack apart and even show signs of collapsing. Under the terrifying roar, Su Zimo's body burst out with a bloody mist. His muscles and flesh were cracked with bloody lines in a frightening manner. Grunting, Su Zimo's head was splitting and his face was pale. The power of the sound was way too terrifying. Su Zimo's body was stronger than most golden cores. And now, under this roar, his body was actually showing signs of breaking apart. His tendons were snapped and cracks appeared on his bones while his organs were dislocated from the shock. If this was before Su Zimo cultivated the organs refinement section, he would have burst into a mist of blood without a corpse instantly against that roar. However, when Su Zimo's body was seriously injured, the essence energy that was running rampant in his body gushed into his flesh, tendons, bones and organs. Initially, Su Zimo's body could not accommodate that much life essence. However, the injury indirectly sealed all the excess essence energies within Su Zimo's flesh and blood. In the future, he would be able to absorb that energy slowly. Night Spirit's situation was not much better. Its body was stained with blood from the roar and it was barely breathing. Despite that, Night Spirit did not show any signs of fear. If Su Zimo were to pay attention at this moment, he would discover that Night Spirit's gaze was extremely terrifying right now. Pitch black and deep, it was emanating a cold, killing intent. At the same time, a hazy mist appeared around the surroundings of the gray-robed cultivator. There was an ancient aura to the mist, as if they had returned to the beginning of the universe where chaos had yet to develop. Enveloped by it, the gray-robed cultivator was the only god within. Golden Core Phenomenon. While Su Zimo was not a golden core, he could determine the origin of the haze right away by sensing its aura. He had witnessed 2 golden core phenomenons before. The first was Spirit Peak's master, Wen Xian's ethereal sword rain. The second was the bone-corroding black wind from a golden core of the mysterious faction. This haze phenomenon was the third that Su Zimo had seen. Sensing the energy feedback coming from the gray-robed cultivator's golden core phenomenon, Su Zimo could tell that it was much stronger than the 2 he had seen before. In fact, he had a feeling that even the first 2 golden core phenomenons combined might not be a match for the gray-robed cultivator's golden core phenomenon. The gap between them was obvious. So, this person is a golden core. A thought crossed Su Zimo's mind. The early-stage foundation establishment that was displayed when making use of the spirit-peering art to check out the gray-robed cultivator's realm was not accurate at all. Under the roar of that powerful life form, the gray-robed cultivator frowned and was forced to release his golden core phenomenon as a defensive measure. Chapter 241. Taking the Blame. Chapter 241. Taking the Blame. The roar did not last long before it disappeared. However, an even more terrifying pressure enveloped the surroundings of the godly mountain. Boom! There was a deafening sound. It was as though a huge life form had descended at the top of the mountain, causing it to tremble with the risk of collapsing at any moment. Any thoughts of escaping by now would simply be a fool's dream. Su Zimo looked at the gray-robed cultivator. He believed that even if the latter was a golden core, he would not be able to escape. Unhurriedly, the gray-robed cultivator pulled out a dark rag from his storage bag. His entire figure flickered as he walked to a corner and covered himself with the rag. Right in front of Su Zimo's eyes, the gray-robed cultivator's figure disappeared entirely along with his aura, as though he was one with the wall. There was no trace left at all. If he had not seen it personally, Su Zimo would not have believed it. It was as if the gray-robed cultivator had disappeared into thin air. However, Su Zimo knew that the gray-robed cultivator was still there hiding in the corner. While the rag may have looked inconspicuous, it could hide its tracks and even conceal its aura such that one couldn't be discovered. That was what the gray-robed cultivator relied on. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was the only one left in the cave. He was all alone with eggshells that were licked cleanly scattered all over the floor. Anyone who saw this would instantly guess the truth. Su Zimo did not have much time to think. The powerful life form on top of the godly mountain could descend at any moment. With a swift motion, Su Zimo headed to the corner where the gray-robed cultivator was hiding and stood by the side expressionlessly. The well-hidden gray-robed cultivator was initially waiting to see Su Zimo make a fool out of himself, but when he saw this, he was shocked. Even though the treasure he had could hide his body and conceal his aura, it was unable to withstand the impact of any attacks. If the life form outside were to see everything within the cave, it would definitely lose its mind and be enraged. By then, if the life form were to launch an apocalyptic attack in Su Zimo's direction, he would definitely be implicated as well. Instantly, the gray-robed cultivator understood Su Zimo's intentions. Fuck! What a schemer! The gray-robed cultivator cursed internally. Even if he attacked Su Zimo, it was already too late and he would expose himself. The gray-robed cultivator wanted nothing more than to send Su Zimo flying with a kick. However, he had no choice but to spread the rag and pull Su Zimo under it as well. Instantly, the figures and aura of both men disappeared. Right after he did that, the godly mountain was met with a tremendous force that sent the peak of the mountain flying, exposing the cave entirely. When the Blood Crow Palace's lord sensed the arrival of the terrifying aura, he realized that it was already too late to leave. Doing so would only cause misunderstandings. Fortunately, he had not entered the cave and would not have offended the life forms here. Furthermore, according to the Blood Curse's guidance, Su Zimo was hidden in this cave. Once the life form of this primordial ruin arrived, that lad would have nowhere to run from the cave and would die for sure. If everything went well, he would reveal his identity and the other party shouldn't make things difficult for him. He could then leave this place safely despite the dangerous journey it was. Roar! 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 As the palace lord expected, a series of powerful roars could be heard right after the arrival of the terrifying aura. The deafening howls shot into the clouds and cracked all the rocks around. A few seconds after, the primordial life form descended on the godly mountain. Although he was mentally prepared, the pupils of the palace lord could not help but constrict while his heart palpitated upon seeing the primordial life form with his very eyes. The primordial life form had yet to reveal its full appearance. However, merely half of its body that circled the godly mountain was more than enough to envelop it almost completely. The massive body circled around the godly mountain, hundreds of meters long and covered with green scales that shone with a cold gleam. Clang! Clang! Beneath that body, a pair of gigantic claws popped out. Their joints protruded and they were extremely sharp, almost piercing through the entire godly mountain when they dug into it. The primordial life form's horns were towering as he looked down with eyes that emitted a cold light filled with killing intent. There was a beard on the chin of the primordial life form. When it opened its huge mouth, terrifyingly sharp teeth were revealed as thick saliva drooled from the side of the mouth of that ferocious face. Dragon! This was a true dragon. The palace lord had read about the form of a dragon in the ancient records of the clan, but now that he was seeing it in real life, he was still extremely shocked. The descriptions in the ancient records were less than 1% of what it actually was. At best, the ancient records could only describe the appearance. However, the unique aura and dominance of a dragon was something that could not be penned down. If Su Zimo could see this divine dragon right now, he would definitely recall something. Before entering the primordial ruin, the gray-robed cultivator had once said, "I've seen a true dragon before. Even though it was just a scale and half a claw, it was shocking enough. That single scale was bigger than our entire bodies, and that claw was longer and sharper than our flying swords." No one took those words for real. However, looking at it now, the divine dragon's appearance was even superior to what the gray-robed cultivator had described. Without using much strength, the divine dragon sent half of the godly mountain flying, exposing everything within the cave instantly. The palace lord took a single look and blood drained from his face immediately. Nobody. The depths of the cave was in a huge mess with a gigantic dragon egg that was smashed into pieces. The liquid within disappeared and even the eggshells were licked cleanly. But there was nobody at all. To be precise, there was only a single person, him. A dragon egg was eaten by someone. Other than the divine dragon who had just arrived, the only person left in the scene was him. There was no way of explaining himself. The palace lord was a little stunned. This was completely different from what he had imagined. When the divine dragon caught sight of the eggshells on the floor, an endless fury and wrath surged in its eyes, almost spewing out with fire. Instantly, the palace lord felt a chilling killing intent gushing towards him. "And no, it's not me." The palace lord was completely flustered. As someone at Void Reversion Realm with the title of Tao Being, there was almost no one in the Great Zhou dynasty who could be a match for him. Even so, against an adult dragon, the odds were completely stacked against him. The gray-robed cultivator hidden in a corner was a little stunned as well. How was there someone else as well? That person is quite skillful. He must be a professional at taking the blame. To think that he would rush over at a time like this with such an accurate timing. The gray-robed cultivator lamented internally. The two of them hid in the corner motionlessly, not even daring to lift the rag to check out the situation outside. However, when he heard the commotion outside, Su Zimo could roughly guess what was going on. The person who spoke earlier was probably the pursuer hunting him down. Su Zimo truly wanted to lift the rag up and check out that person's appearance. He was also curious about what the primordial life form that had appeared was. But he remained rational and endured it. At a time as such, any slight movement could expose the both of them. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.